Good evening. I would like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next regular Board of Education meeting is on Tuesday, February 23rd at 7:30 p.m. in the board meeting room. Thank you. Thank you all for Zooming in this evening. Just a couple of brief comments. I want to thank you all for continuing to participate in the dialogue around the 2021-2022 budget process through your emails, phone calls, and comments. Also during public hearing and public comments during our meetings. All voices are important, and the administration and the board have been listening and reading all of it. We are one community, and as I have referenced in the past, our schools exist for children, and we should keep that focus always at the forefront of our mind. We must continue to keep the dialogue professional, civil, and about the facts. The administration and school teams have spent countless hours developing a budget and a plan that delivers the high-performing district standards the district is known for, while investing in the future and looking to develop organizational and operating models that deliver education excellence and services to all our students. Our superintendent, assistant superintendents, administrators, principals, and teachers are the professionals we've hired to do this work. I would also ask again that we look to the administration, our local school administrators, and the board for the facts, not social media. I want to thank the administration, the local school teams, the finance teams, and the board for all the hard work around this budget and the follow-up that has taken place over the last several months based on questions and comments from various boards, committees, and the public. Also, a quick update. This week, we had our appropriation request for COVID expenses of $2,384,934 moved to the Board of Finance. The appropriation request was approved for $1,788,130. The reduction was from the recent ESSER II grant of $596,805, which the district received notification of after our appropriation request had been approved by the board and forwarded. I want to thank the Board of Finance for convening a special meeting and moving this process along so that the appropriation request will be with the RTM at their February meeting. I look forward to further conversations as the RTM F&B and RTM Education move through the process. Thank you. Moving on to public comment.
Good evening. If you would like to speak during public comment, please click the participants icon on the bottom of your Zoom screen. Next, click the raised hand option. You will notice a blue hand icon appear in the upper corner of your screen where your face, name, and/or number appears. When it is your turn to speak, the facilitator will identify you and announce that you are unmuted for public comment. Once recognized and unmuted, please state your name and address. You will have up to 3 minutes to comment. Katie Lublin, you are recognized and unmuted.
Thank you. My name is Katie Lublin. I live at 24 Maplewood Drive, and I am the CDSP Special Education Subcommittee Chair. I'm speaking tonight in support of making a change from SESS facilitator to assistant principal at the elementary level. I am pleased that the district is looking critically at how to improve and enhance this role. That this position will be new and posted, going through the full rigor of the Darium hiring process, gives each elementary the opportunity to choose the best and most qualified candidate to bring a particular lens into our schools and elevate the way all students receive and all staff provide support. We will be going into the next school year after the most disruptive educational period our staff and students have ever faced. Special education in Darien has made great strides in the last 7 years. This progress, combined with the disruption of the last 12 months, make this exactly the right time to ensure that we have the most robust and qualified team in place to meet students where they are. By giving an administrator with specific special education background a seat at the table, the district is demonstrating their support for and their dedication to providing for the needs of all students. The specific skill set of a special education administrator will enhance teacher evaluations and professional development, along with creating another person in the building with expertise to work with all students, staff, and families, not just those attending a PPT. I see 2 keys to the success of this change. One is in hiring the right people for the job. The second is in the dynamic between the new and existing administrators. To the former, I hope the district will consider adding a parent perspective to the interview panel. To the latter, I'm encouraged by the full support the elementary principals have shown. In closing, I would like to thank the administration for bringing a smart initiative that moves our district forward. While we likely have some ground to regain the next year, we must also be looking for ways to progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Loveland.
Lindsay DeVito, you are unmuted and recognized.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Mrs. DeVito.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. My name is Lindsay DeVito, and I live at 78 Fitch Avenue. I am speaking tonight in support of changing the role of SESS facilitator to assistant principal at the elementary level. Being a mother of 2 girls with special needs, a special education representative for ELP and currently at Hindley, and an active member of the Darium public school community for 7 years, I have witnessed some highs and lows in regards to special education. While both of my daughter's experiences have been extremely positive, other families have struggled. They are tired and frustrated. Over the years, I have also heard from many of the same families that we need better organization, communication, and planning to best help special education students succeed. I believe elevating the SES facilitator role to assistant principal will achieve these goals. It says that regardless of whether you think Darian's current model is working or not, we can do better. It is the structure we have at central office. It is a formula that works. The world is changing more quickly than ever, and our schools, students, staff, administrators, and parents need to be adaptable and willing to evolve. There is a tremendous need for a more organized approach that fine-tunes communication and planning, and this role will facilitate better collaboration and efficiency, not only between principals and assistant principals, but also with school psychologists, case managers, teachers, support staff, administrators, PTOs, and parents. Making this change supports our needs, our efforts, and our growth. At last Tuesday's Board of Education meeting, Mrs. Klein reminded us that this is to enhance the current role. It's not to compromise it. I think it's time we look towards our administration as leaders we can trust and who have the best interests of all Darian students in their minds and hearts. It has been suggested that this maybe isn't the year to shake up this role, but I think it absolutely is the time to do this. Going into the 2021-22 school year is going to be more challenging than the current in many ways, and making this change will ensure that we can better support all students. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. DeVito. I just want to remind everyone out there, we want to make sure we hear from everyone. You do have the option, if what someone has said before you is similar to what you're saying, you by all means can come on and agree to what's been said already and send your comments into us. And if you have sent comments into us, we've shared them with the board and the administration, so you don't necessarily have to read them this evening. You're more than welcome to, but I just wanted to go over those facts. Thank you.
Lori Olson, you are unmuted and recognized.
Good evening. My name is Lori Olson, and I live at 16 Little Brook Road North. I am co-chair of CDSP. These are unusual times, but our PTOs did an amazing job collecting information from parents, virtual coffees, wires, and blasts. They worked tirelessly fostering communication. We encouraged feedback with newsletters and town halls. We invited our school community to discuss obstacles to implementation and welcomed all opinions. The points I will share are consistent with what we have said throughout this budget cycle. On the COVID expenses, quite simply, knowing what we know about the costs associated with COVID mitigation and recognizing that there is a high probability that mitigation strategies will need to remain in place into the fall and potentially beyond, it appears that this is a good faith probable expense. The district's overall goal needs to be opening the schools fully in the fall in the safest possible manner for teachers, students, administrators, and all types of support staff. If the concern is not to overburden taxpayers, we like the idea of funding the COVID RC outside of taxing. On the SESS facilitator change to an AP, we support this change based on the broad and generally quite positive feedback we have heard from parents. We believe that the questions and concerns have been addressed with thoughtful and sufficient responses. We trust our experts, and there have been unwavering support for this initiative from the educational professionals. On the elimination of team-taught English and history classes, we support adding back these back into the budget as it feels short-sighted to eliminate any programs designed to support students as we prepare to rebuild post-pandemic. We support restoring the elementary instructional paras, the DHS library paraprofessionals, and the Middlesex library media specialists for the same reason. We do not support cutting the Achievers program for 9th grade, as we feel the discussion of the overall gifted program should take place before making adjustments. We do not support cutting budget control in half. We have 4 sections already on the cusp of breaking, and it is imperative that we protect for small class sizes. And we support the addition of a second teacher in residence program, as it sounds like that is the best practice to ensure a successful launch to the program. In conclusion, we have learned a lot over the last 10 months of the pandemic. The district has done a good job opening and keeping our school community safe. We've begun to resume some semblance of typical operations, and we need to use what we've learned as a blueprint for the continued resumption of activities into the fall. That said, there are certainly unanticipated challenges ahead, and as a group of community leaders, we need to remain committed to a rational and constructive approach to problem solving and addressing these potential unknowns. The pandemic has demanded a lot of all of us, and we must remain steadfast to face whatever challenges may lie ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Olson.
Can I just say the Darium High School Parents Association cannot raise their hand?
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle, can we call on them next?
Absolutely. Darien High School Association, you are unmuted and recognized.
Is someone in here?
Can
Go ahead.
someone turn the video on for me? Sorry, start video.
I think that's on your end, controlling the video.
I'm trying.
There
Okay.
we go. We can see you.
Okay, sorry about that. Good
State
evening.
your name and address, please.
Yes, I'm Tiffany
you.
O'Connor. I live at 48 Lewarden Road. I'm speaking as one of the co-chairs of the Darien High School Parents Association. While the proposed SESS to assistant principal change pertains to the elementary schools, we have listened carefully as the PTOs share information and often work together to support all students in the district. We have observed PTO chairs, CDSP representatives, and special education subcommittee representatives from all 5 elementary schools painstakingly seeking as much feedback as possible from the school parents they represent. As some of the elementary school PTO chairs have explained to the board, the PTOs take this part of our job very seriously. Our public hearing speeches are a culmination of listening to parents, writing, and rewriting to ensure their voices are heard, all in the allotted 3 minutes. But on the topic of the SESS change, voices were not heard. Because the cut was out of sequence, the PTOs missed opportunities to share much of the feedback collected from parents. Going forward, I hope traditional procedures are followed and respected for a number of reasons, especially because doing so allows the PTOs to advocate for the school parent community they work so hard to represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Connor.
Kathleen Burke, you are unmuted and recognized.
Good evening. This is Michael Burke, not Kathleen Burke. I could not change the ID on my computer. But good evening. I'm Michael Burke of 15 Lake Drive here in Darien, though I'm speaking to you from my law office in Manhattan tonight. I know it's unusual for a former BOE member to participate in public comment. In fact, I do not recall it occurring during my 6 years on the board, but these remain very unusual times. I've listened to every minute of your last few board meetings. I know tonight you are considering, among other matters, how to appropriate COVID funds for the next school year, whether to add SESS assistant principals at the elementary schools, and whether to eliminate English and social studies team teaching at the high school. I seek not to advocate for a particular outcome on those proposals, though I suspect you know how I would view them, but rather to advocate for the 9 of you. You have listened to an extraordinary amount of public comment on these issues, together with, no doubt, private communications and advice from others. Some of it cogent and informed, all of it necessary and proper. I ask you, however, as Edmund Burke might, to use not only your industry in considering these matters, but also your judgment, because to do otherwise would be a betrayal of your public trust. If you have done your work, if you have read, if you have listened to your colleagues and administrators, then there is no one better prepared to make these decisions than you. Work with each other, talk with each other, encourage each other's better angels. I've either served with, campaigned with, or against all of you. I know that you have the intelligence, independence, heart, and integrity to answer your charge and oath of office and do what is in the best interest of our children. Soon this will be your budget. Only your names will be on it. You will be responsible for advocating for it. Make it one that you can be proud of. To finish, while I state no position on the SESS assistant principals here, let me just say that to suggest that the proposal is violative of the Equal Protection Clause embedded within the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution, as was suggested last week, is at best misinformed and certainly a misapprehension of Brown versus Board of Education. To suggest or imply that Dr. Adley or anyone in his administration would put forward an impermissibly discriminatory proposal or seek to create an environment within our schools that is not in the best interest of all of the children of Darien is without foundation and frankly repulsive. Thank you. My best to all of you. Now it's on to finish your budget. Please make us all proud and don't put us on a path to mediocrity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burke.
Dorinda Bonanno, you are unmuted and recognized.
Oh, there.
Can you
Hello.
hear Mrs. Bonanno?
Yes, I'm sorry. My name is Dorinda Bonanno at 2 Plymouth Lane, and I am here with my child. This is Alex Bonanno, who I hope she's a current, they are a current freshman at Darien High School, and I hope it's okay. Can they speak after me?
Thank you. Keep going.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
I want to express my wholehearted support of the Achievers program at Darien High School as part of the IDEA program. Alex is enrolled in this program currently, and it is everything and more than they hoped that it would be. Like other kids in the IDEA program, Alex is taking a variety of honors level classes this year and probably will continue to take them throughout high school. These classes are challenging and appropriate, but the curriculum is set and students follow along an established path. I feel strongly that our kids, especially those given the gifted label and the expectations that go with it, have so few options to explore beyond this path. And that is why I support the Achievers program so strongly. This is a classroom where students get to focus on their passions, try new things, potentially fail, pick themselves up and stretch and develop their thinking, all with the support of each other and the support of a fantastic teacher, and with no burden of achieving a certain grade. And the result, it's a child who's excited to be doing something for themselves. I've seen this with Alex already this year. They have chosen a topic that is deeply personal to them and is now seriously producing a body of work that would not be possible in any of their other classes. This has given them a sense of achievement far greater than any A on a maths test. The research, time management, and creative skills they are learning through the program will be valuable throughout their life. I think all IDEA students need the opportunity to complete their time in IDEA through the Achievers program. And so we ask humbly, please do not remove the funding for this program. Thanks very much. And then this is Alex. Here.
Hi.
Hi, Alex. Thank you, Mrs. Bonanno, and thank you, Alex.
Yep. Okay.
Go.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm currently in the Achievers program, and I went to Achievers Night for the first time when I was in 3rd grade, and I immediately knew that I wanted to do it. And the ability to like dive into whatever you wanted to do is an opportunity that only the Achievers program gives. So I couldn't wait. And here I am now finally able to do it. And it's everything I hoped and wanted it to be. Many of my interests were outside of my academic classes at DHS, and the Achievers program is the place where I can pursue those interests in a structured and supported way. The whole point of the program is to do something you can't do in your regular classes. So it's a special program, and I hope it stays for years to come.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you both. Have a good evening.
Trisha Cooney, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hi.
Mrs. Cooney, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great, thank you.
Hi, my name is Trisha Bresnahan. I live at 11 Glenville Avenue. I am co-chair of CPAC. Thank you to Dr. Adley and the Board of Education for listening to our input this evening. CPAC believes that the SESS facilitator to AP for special education at the elementary level should be cut from this year's budget. Throughout this budget process, our CPAC parent group has questioned this position, asked detailed questions, and ultimately have given our reasons for cutting it. We won't repeat them all tonight, but we will explain why we think there should be shared ownership of all students. While much comparison has been made to the Westport model, Darium's proposal for special education assistant principals is not consistent with this model, as assistant principals in Westport are in the General Education Administration budget. In our public hearing remark, CPAC asked a question. Would this district or any other create separate assistant principals based on gender, religion, or race? Let's look at the research. In his book, Effective Inclusion Schools, Dr. Thomas Hare, former director of the U.S. Department of Special Education Programs and renowned expert in inclusive education, explains that there is a tendency in school districts for school leaders and principals to delegate special education. Dr. Hare says this is a mistake for many reasons, but most of all because students with disabilities provide a major impetus for instructional improvement for all students. The Council of Chief State School Officers developed a guide in collaboration with over 27 education partners to help states establish a vision for effective, inclusive principal leadership. The vision states, in promoting equity for all, inclusive principals must respond effectively to the potential and needs of each student. Inclusive principals ensure high expectations and appropriate supports so that each student across race, gender, ethnicity, language, disability, sexual orientation, family background, and/or family income can excel in school. In today's CPAC presentation titled Neurodiversity in Schools, Creating a Culture of Belonging, NYU inclusion specialist Lauren Huff-Williams explained that true inclusion benefits everyone. She said, when we design physical spaces, create learning opportunities, and craft social experiences with everyone in mind, we send a message, everyone belongs here. Creating a culture of belonging takes everyone in a school. She posed the question,
We're almost at time, Mrs. Brosnahan.
Yeah, I'm wrapping up, thanks.
Thank you.
How can we increase understanding of neurodiversity and raise the level of the ocean? What if every administrator, teacher, therapist, and school professional actually had the tools to better understand and support their neurodiverse schools? Imagine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Brosnahan.
Mia Miopoulos, you are unmuted and recognized.
Good evening. My name is Mia Mahopoulos. I am the co-president of DAEG and I live at 3 Mansfield Place. We thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I am here to voice our support for adding a formal review of the IDEA program to the board's master agenda. This year, we have approximately 240 students in grades 2 to 9 in the IDEA program. We have a team of teachers who are incredibly dedicated and talented in working with gifted learners. IDEA students look forward to their once or twice a week classes and often describe the ability to learn with like-minded peers in a small, risk-free setting as the best part of their Darien school experience. From the Greek and Roman programs in elementary school to the study of time relativity in 7th grade, the IDEA students are stretching their creative muscles in ways they would not have the opportunity to do in their traditional classroom setting. All IDEA students and their parents are grateful for this experience. However, despite the success of many aspects of our IDEA program, we believe there is further opportunity to support these gifted learners on their educational journey. And we believe that the time to explore these opportunities is now. On the heels of a successful strategic planning kickoff, including a core value of delivering the highest quality education for each student to reach their own individual potential, there is an opportunity to evaluate our gifted and talented program to ensure we are doing the best we absolutely can as a district for these students. We feel strongly that in order to be most effective, this review be conducted by an independent consultant who can bring an outside perspective to our current program. Some questions that this independent review could answer include: what aspects of our program are working well? Is the time per week allocated for IDEA the optimal approach? What are the best practices in the education of gifted learners that we can incorporate into our current program? What are quantitative measures of success for these students? And how can we best support this population outside of their weekly IDEA classes? As a district, we are quick to celebrate the accomplishments and awards won by our IDEA students, which is truly wonderful. Their successes are certainly a major driver of our district's excellent reputation and should be celebrated. However, in turn, we should be willing to invest in these gifted students as well. Adding an IDEA program review to the Board of Ed master agenda will be a sign that our district is willing to make such an investment. Our IDEA students have bright futures and deserve the time and resources to help them reach their highest levels of academic and personal achievement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Mahopoulos.
Jacqueline Miller, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hi, thank you. There are actually two of us here tonight. There's myself and my son, Joseph Chicanos, who is a sophomore at Darium High School. He's going to speak first.
Hello, my name is Joseph Chicanos, and I live at 84 Fitch Avenue. I know that the board has been discussing the budget for many things, but the thing that I specifically want to talk about is the busing. I have been riding the bus to school on the days that I go to school for the first half of this year so far, and it's been great to have a defined way to get to school that I don't need to worry about not having. I remember when I was the school was just cracking down on people who weren't supposed to be on the bus 2 not being on bus 2, and I remember being concerned because I was never really sure how I was going to get home until the school day had ended. And I think that on top of any schoolwork I have to do, quizzes and tests, right now I'm picking courses for the next year. Eventually, in the next couple of years, I'll be looking at college. I think that the added stress of trying to figure out how to get to and from school is not something that students should have to worry about. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph.
I'm Jacqueline Miller. I live at 84 Fitch Avenue. Section 10-220 of the Connecticut General Statutes charges boards of education to, quote, provide for the transportation of children wherever transportation is reasonable and desirable, end quote. Looking around the snowy roads and sidewalks of Darien this week, can any of us truly think that bus transportation is not reasonable or desirable? Do any of us really believe that it's a best practice to have kids tromping through the slush in 20-degree weather before sunrise? Without buses, non-driving students who live within the 2-mile walk radius of DHS have few options to get to and from school. They can walk or they can get a ride from their parents. And while many parents may have the flexibility to do that now, when COVID is gone and they're working back in offices, that will no longer be the case. Adding 2 additional buses gives DHS students a chance to return to post-COVID life without the added stress of worrying about getting to and from school. We know that it is a reasonable level of service because it's provided by every district in our DIRG. And we know that it's desirable because families in Darien have been lobbying for added bus service for more than a decade. I hope the board votes to support the addition of extra buses tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Miller.
Ellen Abbott, you are unmuted and recognized.
Mrs. Abbott,
You
can
are
you hear
still
us?
muted.
Sorry, I thought it went on with my video. Apologize about that. My name is Ellen Abbott. I live at 117 West Avenue, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Royal PTO. I'm speaking tonight in support of our C24, moving the SS facilitator to an assistant principal. I'm doing so after listening to the administration's presentation and speaking personally with our principal at length about how she envisions the role for our school. I've been impressed by all the ways she sees this change as a betterment for all learners at our school and ensuring that learning is as inclusive as it can be and that teachers and parents can be supported as efficiently as possible. She's excited to have this additional support for teachers and parents, one that can better support classroom instruction and more quickly facilitate positive outcomes for kids. While I can appreciate that not everyone may agree with my conclusion, it's of particular concern to me how conversation around this topic has unfolded and how this item even came to be in danger of being cut from the budget. I was both surprised and disappointed that after public comment expired, the board chose to add this measure to cut the line of the budget without advance notice. This last minute decision outside of normal protocols is disheartening and doesn't seem to be in the interest of the larger elementary student body. Rather, this late addition appears to be an attempt to circumvent the process by which the board generally solicits feedback. And therefore, I'm concerned that the board still may not have received the full community weigh-in on this particular matter. Quite honestly, adding a cut at this late stage in response to just one comment feels disrespectful to the established process and the amount of work that many volunteers across the town have put into thoughtfully making recommendations about how this budget can best serve our children in the coming year. As part of the CDSP writing team, we carefully considered how we could best represent our school communities, and we made special considerations to ensure that parents heard directly from the administration and principals about the changes they were suggesting. We did offer support for this issue in 2 separate speeches in last week's public hearing on the budget, and we did not make our recommendations lightly. They were only made after consultation with our school communities and our school special ed reps. Inserting an item into the potential cut list after the formal feedback process is finished will only hamper our ability to gauge true community support on an issue. Every year, we'll have items on contention for the upcoming year's budget. And while I respectfully disagree that this item should be cut from this year's budget, I'm not advocating that it couldn't be considered. Rather, I'm asking you to consider to uphold the process by which we collect community feedback and include all cuts earlier. Shortening the process inevitably means that voices will not be heard and that volunteers and citizens will become disenfranchised when work and time that they've put in could be disregarded so easily. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Abbott.
Teresa Vogt, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hi, my name is Teresa Vogt. I'm at 22 Circle Road. I am the vice chair of the RTM Education Committee, but my comments tonight are not on behalf of the RTM Education Committee. They're my own. I just wanted to express my support for us budgeting for COVID expenses, particularly for the opening of the school year. It's simply smart budgeting, and actually the town last night approved their budget, and they have budgeted for COVID expenses. It is simply not smart budgeting to open the school year knowing you are going to need to go to the Board of Finance for appropriations. So I want to express my support for budgeting for COVID expenses. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Vogt.
Natasha Rose, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hi, my name is Natasha Tomai, and I am the parent of 2 girls at Royal Elementary School. This is my first Board of Ed meeting, and I very recently become aware of the discussion about promoting the SESSs to assistant principals. Because of time constraints, I made sure that I made very quick calls to people on both sides, reaching across the aisle, if you will, and I made the decision to very strongly support the promotion of the SES to the assistant principal position. In general, I do not support budget increases, particularly those that reach into perpetuity. However, as a result of my experience as a parent of children who have special needs and how taxing and time consuming the process is, both to the administration and to the parents, I believe here that this is really a no-brainer decision. We're talking about plus or minus $150,000 in total, $30,000 per administrator, and giving those administrators teeth to go into the classrooms, to go to the providers, the OTs, the PTs, the school psychologists, all of those special ed providers, and then creating bandwidth for the current principals and the current assistant principals to better serve the typical students. So one thing I'd like to add is the first speaker did bring up a very good point about adding parent perspective to the interview process. I think that is very important here. While I very much support my SESS and know her well, her predecessor I was not particularly fond of. So this is really about giving more bandwidth for all of the kids in the elementary school systems. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Could you get her address, please?
Could I have your address, please, Natasha?
Oh, yes. It is 6 McLaren Road South. And I did send a very, I sent a very personal message to your board that explains my perspective a little more, but that was before I was more informed on this topic. But it adds a little bit of color to my experience as a parent of kids with special needs.
Thank you very much.
User Nicole, you are unmuted and recognized.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I'm Nicole Lyons, actually. And I'm at 63 Relihan Road. And I just wanted to say that I am so grateful for the inclusion of bus number 25 in next year's budget. And I want to thank the board so much for really listening to and responding so quickly to our needs on this issue. I am urging you to support the motion to add the 2 additional buses as a trial. All of our neighborhoods, but certainly mine, I'm right on the 2-mile walking radius, unfortunately, right on the inside of that radius. But the neighborhoods are visibly changing. The houses are getting bigger. The household sizes and number of bus eligible children is increasing like crazy. The number of working parents is actually also increasing. And, it's very desirable, obviously, to have proximity to the Norotan Heights train station. We're really the last families that should be expected to have the flexibility to figure out how to get our kids to school safely. So I also just want to say that I can assure you that I don't even care. I know if it's not cool to take the bus, I don't care. My future high schooler and all of the parents in my neighborhood would agree that their future high schoolers, we need them to ride the bus, and we're counting on them being able to do so. So again, I thank you for voting to include those 2 additional buses as a trial, and wish everybody the best.
Thank you, Mrs. Lyons.
Carolina Magui, you are unmuted and recognized.
Thank you. My name is Carolina Magowi. I live at 28 Kensett, and I have 2 children at our public schools, an 8th grader at MMS and a senior at DHS. I would like to start by saying out loud here once again how grateful I am to the administration, our board, our teachers and staff for the incredible work they're doing during these trying times. I would also like to take this opportunity and thank the Board of Finance for their swift process of the approval of our first COVID appropriation, which I fully supported. And I hope that any others coming down the line are as efficient and as quick. The 3 quick comments I would like to make are, I fully support the proposal of changing the role of the SESS facilitator to an assistant principal position at the elementary level. Having seen the presentation from the administration and heard them, I know that adding an assistant principal with a special education background will end up being benefiting for everyone at the schools. The addition of RC 28, the COVID expense, I believe this is a must that should be in our budget this year, especially knowing that we will incur them at a minimum to open the next school year. I trust that the 45 days that Dr. Adley has requested is a good way to proceed, and hopefully the Board of Finance will find a way to fund this without any additional taxes to all of us residents of Darien. We need for everyone to be nimble and creative, especially at times like this. And lastly, to our board, I hope that you do what is best tonight for our children, all our children. I hope that you have done your homework, that you work together, and that you leave your politics aside. Sadly, it's not what we've seen in many of our meetings during this current budget process. So please, I hope you all rise to the occasion. Once again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. McGooey.
There are no more raised hands at this time.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you all for participating in the public comment.
Really?
We'll move on to the, no one else, Michelle?
No, there are no more raised hands at this time.
Thank you. We will move on to the superintendent's report.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you to our participants at home. Thank you to our families and our students for accommodating a few disruptions over the past week or so. We had the remote learning day. We had a late arrival, and it continues to be in the forecast for some inclement weather. So thank you for going with the flow a little bit. Congratulations to Theatre 308. They had 2 student-produced one-act plays that premiered over the weekend. If you get a chance to preview them. We also had some 8th graders from Middlesex who were featured. I'd like to recognize some of our art students, special recognition to the students who received awards recently from the Connecticut Regional Scholastic Arts Awards. Those students are Thomas Clearley, Juliana Han, Desi Gill, Chelsea Chevenez, and Kinga Srendinka. Additionally, Katie Lahan won an honorable mention from the Start Show at Concordia College. I also want to recognize, if I can, Jacqueline Samus, the department chair, and her staff for the amazing work they do. If you've seen the 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional work, it's just absolutely phenomenal. So congratulations as we continue to promote. There are a couple of meetings that are coming up for Oxbridge Building Committees on Thursday. We have excited about the facilities meeting tomorrow, and we have a finance meeting on Thursday morning. Want to welcome back, and we extended a warm welcome back to our 7th graders and 9th graders this week as the next phase of our plan to welcome students back. Tokenique will have a makeup day on a half day this Friday, and weather permitting, hopefully. They will make up for the closure from the storm outage. Teachers will complete a required state assessment, reading assessment that afternoon. Professional development for the rest of the teachers will take place on Friday. That includes a mixture of choice and also assigned professional development, particularly at the elementary school for math and literacy, department-based primarily at the high school, but there's choice for a lot of our staff throughout the day. So thanks to Mr. Tremberg and his staff for organizing the day that's coming Friday. Vaccinations are up and running, and we're in the next phase of 1B. And we were given notice about the permission to upload staff who are 65 plus, and technically starting Thursday, but since people didn't want to waste vaccines, they've been able to upload some a little bit earlier, so we're ready to start to vaccinate the staff. So that has been very helpful. Appreciate the work of Mr. Knopf, David Knopf, our health director in town. You may not realize it, but we're hitting 100 days, and the elementary schools tend to celebrate the 100 days around the district with everything from 100 ideas of kindness to math problems around 100 to they're gonna have a wee bit of a parade about looking like 100 and all sorts of things. So anyway, we appreciate that wee bit of levity. But board strategic planning and looking at all of these days, there's a lot of meetings coming up, and I didn't want to compromise this process. So we're looking at potentially February 25th. I would ask the board just to look at that date. You don't have to answer me back now, but December 25th at 7 p.m. We do have a meeting on the Tuesday. This would be a 1 agenda item meeting. I'd like to try and keep this initiative going if I can, because we're ready to actually embark on the next phase of this. And with that, I wish the staff and our community and families a healthy and safe winter break.
Thank you, Dr. Adley. Any additional board committees or reports? You're right. Approval of minutes. I flipped the page too soon. Thank you, Deb, keeping me on track. approval of minutes. It is requested that the board approve the following: minutes of the special meeting and executive session held on January 26th, 2021, minutes of the regular meeting held on January 26th, 2021, and minutes of the special meeting held on February 2nd, 2021. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes? Mr. Maroney and Mrs. Stein, is that unanimous? Do I have a vote from everyone? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Thanks, Deb. Moving on to any additional board committee reports. Just a quick update, the next Oxbridge Building Committee meeting will be this Thursday, February 11th at 10 o'clock. The project continues to move forward. We've gone over safety protocols up there. At some point in time, we'll organize a board visit to see the big muddy hole in the ground after the big snowstorm. But the project continues to progress. We were not able to work with the state. A lot of it had to do with timing to move the soil off onto the Merritt Parkway site that we were working with the state on. But the contractor, Sean's Lawn, is working with us, and there's some nominal expenses associated with dirt storage now, but we're working through that. We also have had several meetings over the last week on some of the value management items that we continue to look at in the school, and the overall budget continues to be under budget. So I'll leave it at that, but big hole in the ground, big pile of dirt. Luke, Dr. Forshaw has done an incredible job, as has the parent-teacher organization up there and the parents. It's not an easy site. It's not easy to pick up and drop off. We'll continue to assess that. The Darium Police Department has been incredibly helpful, but we thank everyone for their patience as we build a brand new elementary school. So thank you. No other board committee or reports, correct? All right, moving on to presentations and discussions. Dr. Adley, an update on the Darium Public Schools. Excuse me.
Thank you. So we'll proceed through this. A couple of things to address this evening: the cases, the secondary returning in person, athletics and spectators, vaccinations, the February break and travel, and our remote learners. I think Alicia is with us this morning, or this evening, sorry. This was what it was part of your packet, essentially, that was printed on Friday, and that 11 cases. Now that actually being updated as of yesterday is 8 cases. So you can see how we're changing there, and 81 people quarantined. So that's the general direction of what we're experiencing, is a positive direction, as is the state of Connecticut, as is our town at this particular point. So that is a very encouraging news. You tend to see occasionally that communication that goes out to parents and yourselves that I had 1 case, but 25 people seem to be quarantined contacts. That primarily is the practice that we are doing at the elementary schools for the most part. It's just hard to keep the kids away from themselves. That has been a practice that we've had from day one, and supported by our local health officials and also the State Department of Public Health. So that if you see that tends to be what is actually happening. The state, we have dropped here again, so we were going up, we were back down again, Darium cases, so we're 30.5 per 100,000. If you remember that magic number of 25, we've been above that for a long time, and now we seem to be coming down again. The same for Fairfield and Connecticut, seen drops. This is the data from the town for each of the weeks, so you can see how we've significantly dropped and going in a very positive trend. Interestingly enough, as while we go in a positive trend, the State Department of Public Health are being very non-committal about what we are going to see potentially in March. But I won't look forward further than that, but March is very worried about that. They cautioned us today, actually, yesterday morning, on making week to week. Sorry, it was this morning. The days are just passing. It was this morning. But just be making decisions week to week and not to be getting too far ahead of ourselves. I think we've actually done that, to be honest with you. I feel pleased that it's been done in a thoughtful, measured way, contemplative. So I feel that we're on a good trajectory, but they're advising that just stay tuned. They're particularly concerned about the new variant and how that's going to manifest itself here, or if it's going to manifest itself here in the United States, and how much so, and particularly also in Connecticut. But that is encouraging. Anyway, you look at that, everybody needs a wee bit of an uplift, and that's a positive wee message that we're seeing. The number of remote learners, if I were to give you for this week is actually coming down again. That's down to about 478. If I were to add in another week for this week, and that takes us back to just below the first week in November. Now, some of these are obviously people who are quarantined, but it gives you a little bit of a sense. Some of the, if it took like the 12th graders who were actually being remote, they go back to 57 to 75 to 52. So you can see a little bit when we came back, there was an inclination to stay out, and then they're sort of coming back again just as a class, but it just sort of continues to give you a picture of how our remote learners are doing. So I'll go back to just some of the items that we had here, just to make sure I touch upon them if I can. So the secondary return, so we did the phase in, as you know, and we've started to bring the other children back, which is a nice thing, and so far so good. So that is encouraging. We would stay the course. We plan to, after the break, to stay in the mode that we're in until March 1st, and then our schedule is to bring back the entire secondary school student body. And we look forward to that, and hopefully the metrics allow us to do that. We're meeting every week as we continue, as you know we do, and the thought process behind keeping it the same for the week after, not knowing what the week after the travel and so on might look like, which was a little bit what we experienced from the holiday. But at this point, we're anticipating keeping the same model in place and not going remote, and we'll see how that goes. Athletics and Spectators, the athletics program is up and running, and for some of the sports, whether it's indoor track or wrestling, they're doing conditioning primarily, but the other sports are sort of up and running. Now, the idea of no spectators, I know is an issue, and I've received some communications regarding that from parents, most particularly perhaps from hockey players, parents. So when we looked at this particular issue, right, at the time, and actually still the case, CIC still recommends that you have no spectators. SCIC have subsequently said, let's do that for a week and let's see what happens. Those are two contradictory, right? They're just contradictory, right? For the most part, we have the responsibility, regardless of what they say. But if you sort of skin it down a little bit, we have the responsibility for irregular games. FCIC sort of have responsibility for competition games within the league, and then if you get to the state, CIC sort of oversees it. But it's a wee bit contradictory any way you actually look at it. When we met with and we do it every week, when we met with our medical advisors, if there's one thing that they were particularly adamant about, it was this issue. Let's not complicate the thing. Now, you could say in the fall, we did have people who were in, did a different set of circumstances in the fall. And now you can say, well, it's starting to taper off again. Well, that's fine. And then we'll take those things under consideration. My priority is get the kids in school as quickly as we can for as long as we can. And it's also important that the children get engaged in sports if they can, right? So we've embraced that, and we try to structure that. We enthusiastically participated in it. I say in a most respectful way, but my responsibility is not to have every parent or some parents at the game just to be a spectator. Bringing the teachers back, if you may remember, was difficult. One of the things that we have done from the start that has diligently have done it, and it's been very well received. And I can't say to what the contribution to the state we're in, but we haven't had visitors in the school. We're not renting things out in the school. That has been very helpful culturally, practically, logistically. And this was something that our advisors were particularly strong about, that we shouldn't be doing that at this particular point. So it's with that advice that I know that we've instituted that the Spectators for now is on hold. Look, we've tipped our hand that we would like to try and find ways to, particularly for our seniors, for people to get opportunities to view those. We will look at it every week, depending on the data that's in front of us, what other people are doing, so on and so forth. But my priority is to keep this community as safe as I possibly can, while giving the kids the opportunity to connect with each other, to participate in sports, not to the exclusivity of like keeping parents away. But at this point, that's the priority. And if anything can help at this point, I'd like to structure it like that until and if circumstances change. We would certainly like to try and make sure that there's some opportunities at some point. How soon that is, I just can't speculate on that at the moment. But I'm thinking that some board members would be wanting me to answer that question, so I'm answering it directly in that vein. Vaccinations, I think I just talked to. Alicia's here. It's good that we can get them up. There's really the feedback we have for the children being vaccinated, our students, is really it's not going to happen. We don't expect that to happen before next school year. That's kind of what we're getting back from there. And it's nice to see at least getting the teachers up and running. That will give us more confidence and so on and so forth. The February break and travel, I'll let Alicia talk to that. And the remote learners, we will do some sort of more feedback for remote learners. I'm just particularly conscious of making sure that everybody's engaged, right? And that if they're not, that we're following up with them accordingly. And so you'll see some processes in place to try and get that feedback. Alicia, are you there?
I'm here.
Alicia, I don't know if you just touched briefly on the travel, and then if there's anything that I left out, feel free.
Yeah. So for anyone who's traveling, the travel advisory still stands. Anybody leaving the boundaries of Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, or Rhode Island is subject to the travel advisory, which has a couple of options. One is when you return or return to Connecticut from any of those other states other than New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Connecticut, you can quarantine for 10 days or within 72 hours, whether it's before you leave where you are traveling to, within 72 hours of leaving, or then whenever you get home, you can test with either a PCR or an antigen test. And if that test is negative, you can come out of quarantine. Everyone who travels outside those state boundaries that I mentioned has to fill out the travel form that's found on the Connecticut Travel Advisory website, regardless of what your choice is for when you return, whether you're going to quarantine for 10 days or if you're going to test out. If you do decide to test out, you also have to email a copy of your negative test results to the State Department of Health. Those who don't do that and are found to be in violation could be fined up to $500 per person that you're traveling with. So those are kind of the big things. We do ask that all families who travel do share their negative results with us before their kids come to school, or that you have those negative results in hand prior to sending your child to school. You don't send them to school while you're waiting for a result. So that's the basics of the travel advisory, and all that information can be found if you do a Google search for CT travel advisory, and it's written out very well, their explanation of what to do.
So just a couple of other relevant points. Apparently the CDC may be coming out as early as tomorrow with a recommendation for double masking. I don't know what that's going to, don't know if that's going to put people over the edge or help, okay? But we'll see how that plays out. We can all have different opinions on that, but we'll see how that plays out. We have not reported to the state any outbreaks really attributable to in-school spread, because we would be we have to do that if that's the case. And the people who have been quarantined, like how many cases? I mean, I think it's fair to say we get literally a handful that maybe have been quarantined and then have experienced COVID testing or COVID positive. So those are a couple of other just pertinent points that I think have been touched upon in the past and asked about in the past. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I will open it to board discussion. Mrs. Achman.
Has the district come to a decision on senior internships, given that we're in second semester, both for, or what are we, third quarter? For seniors, both for teacher planning, for student planning? Will students be notified? Where are we with that curriculum?
So we are engaged in the discussions, all right, the decision has not been communicated at this particular point. We looked at it and the graduations and so on. The feedback today is to plan for the CM. At least the feedback that we got today is if you're planning for graduation, for example, you have to, at this point, anticipate planning for the same type of scenario that we had the last time and things, unless things change dramatically. So we'll hopefully resolve that pretty quick, Tara.
So, I'm interested in graduation.
Yeah.
I know lots of people are. I'm more looking at, like, from an educational curriculum planning, are you saying we just we'll get notice about seniors? Like, will they be in school that fourth quarter? Will they be on internships that fourth quarter? Or we just haven't been able to make a determination?
So we haven't made the determination just yet. Or at least I haven't confirmed that with the high school principal. I would, well, I don't want to speak and speculate, but it's hard to imagine the internships going forward in a regular scenario, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion, and I'll get it wrapped up pretty quick.
Mr. Sini.
Ellen and Chris, thanks for providing the number of remote learners broken out by grade. And maybe I'm overanalyzing this, but as I look towards the last few weeks, the proportion of seniors, and I'm looking at the light blue, juniors seem to be growing as the numbers decline. Is there anything to read into that? Anything that you can discern what's going on in the high school?
Chris, are you there?
I'm here. I can answer that. I think two things happened. One was when we had the return of all seniors, there were some upperclassmen families, especially, that chose to go fully remote. And that is also the week of the spike that we had a few full athletic teams need to quarantine. So if you look at, you don't have the numbers for this week yet because they came out yesterday ahead of when these slides were made, but those numbers decrease significantly for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade students.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Maroney.
Yeah, so a few weeks ago, we heard that specialized learners do not have a remote learning plan, or some do not. Do we have a metric on how many of those students do not yet have a plan? And those that do, or those that don't, when they will have a plan?
So it's my understanding we have plans for students, but I'll certainly let Shirley just answer that.
Thank you, Dr. Adley. Ms. Murray, all of our
Mrs. Klein, if you could please speak up, that would be helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay, sorry. Is this better?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
The specialized, if you're referring to specialized plans that we have for when students are in remote, case managers and related service providers reach out to those families and they have those implementation plans. If there are families who do not have that or are in contact with their case managers or related service providers, please ask them to reach out and we'll follow up with that immediately. Our understanding is that there has been conversation and those implementation plans are in place in all of our buildings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Klein. Mr. Brown, did I see your hand there?
You did, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Just in terms of the athletics, I would just point out, the success in the fall with the DGFL program, the fact that, kids have been unable to participate in sports, the enthusiasm in the community for sports participation. I would just ask the administration to strongly reconsider the current stand in terms of letting spectators be involved, and if not, perhaps reconsider more frequently to see if we can expedite that decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown, could you just repeat what you said at the end? If not,
well,
I just didn't hear what you said at the end.
I just wouldn't punt for like a month, but if you can think about it, on a weekly basis or more frequent periodicity, that would be great.
We'll certainly do it on a weekly basis. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
And
Mrs. Stein.
I think it's important to note that other teams are allowing parents in
the same facilities will be in. So I think that's going to be an issue we have to be prepared to hear from parents when you have one-sided spectating at games.
I understand that, but I'm responsible for Darium students, right? So
Any additional comments or questions from the board on the state of the schools? Okay, thank you. Moving along, further discussion and possible approval of new courses for Darium High School for the 2021-2022 school year. I'm going to first go through individually because I've gotten some folks that may want further discussion or we need to make decisions individually. I will go through the proposed changes to existing courses. So the motion is to move forward on the changes to these existing courses. I will start with creative writing, proposal to open enrollment to grade 9. Mrs. Ritchie? Yes, okay, thank you, yes. I will.
We mean new courses, not existing courses.
No, these are changes to existing courses we're going through.
Okay.
There's creative writing, there's computer-aided drafting, video broadcast.
Courses that are being modified, and then there are 4 new courses beyond that.
Yep, okay, good.
I want to make sure we're moving.
Sure, no, understood. Great. So again, these are proposed changes to existing courses. So a motion on creative writing, the proposal to open enrollment to grade 9. Mrs. Ritchie, do I have a second? Mrs. Stein, all in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. The second, do I have a motion to move forward the computer-aided drafting and design course, the proposal for title change from just drafting? Mrs. Ritchie has a motion, second by Mr. Brown, all in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. The third change for existing courses, video broadcasting, proposal for title change from media studies, video production, and prerequisite change. Motion to move that, Mrs. Achman, second, Mr. Sini, all in favor? Thank you, that is unanimous. The fourth, the IDEA grade 9 Achievers project, credit change proposal. Do I have a motion on that? Mrs. Ritchie. Do I have a second? Mrs. Parent? No. Yes. Can we have? Yes, if there's any additional discussion.
So on this particular item, I think given that later in the meeting, we'll be voting on our master agenda and hopefully adding to our master agenda a deep dive into IDEA and an overview of the program. I think at this point, I would like to hold off on the credit change until we have completed that process.
Okay. Mrs. Achman.
So I would agree with Mrs. Ritchie. I think the board is, this program has come up now 2 years in a row during budget. And I think probably it's best handled outside of budget. So an update on the program, but until we have that, it's very hard to change credit allotment until we get a full update.
Okay.
I would just echo those former comments.
Any additional comment or questions? So now the motion is to not move forward with the.
No.
The motion is for the credit change. All right. So can I see a raise of hands for all those that are in favor of the credit change for the IDEA grade 9 Achievers project? Mrs. Parent. And Mrs. McCammon. Mrs. McCammon. Okay. All those not in favor of that change? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Could you just mind saying the names?
Yes, sure. All those not in favor of making that change, Mrs. Stein, Mr. Brown, Mrs. Achman, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. Ritchie, Mr. Deneen. Anyone abstaining? Mr. Sini. So that motion, that fails. Yeah, so at this point in time, we don't approve the credit change. I think the overall comments from the board make sense, and I think Dr. Adley will be looking forward to kind of a review of that program.
Yes, we'll discuss that in the master agenda. Yep.
Okay. Moving along to approval of new courses for the Darium High School. There are 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm happy to take them in one lump. Bear with me just a second here. Yep. So I will make a motion to accept the new course proposals at the Darium High School. The STEM Design and Innovation course, the African American, Black and Latino Puerto Rican Studies course, the Introduction to App Development course, and the Accounting Essentials course. Any further discussion on any of those? I look for a motion to move those courses forward. Mr. Maroney, second. Mrs. Ackman, all in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you all very much. Moving along, further discussion and approval of the 2021-2022 proposed Board of Education budget. We just have a quick comment as to some follow-up from our discussion at our special meeting, where we had Mr. Mooney talk to us, and there was some ask of me to reach out to Board of Finance and have a discussion with them. I think we understand our charge here in putting forward a budget based on proposed expenses that we know we need and building a budget that we need to deliver the education to our children. I think it's important that we know all the facts in terms of the financial condition of the town. Just some specific information that was provided to me about the town. The town of Darien has a current fund balance which totals $23 million. This is intended to cover risks of unanticipated expenses, both for the Board of Ed and the town, including COVID expenses and other emergency cash needs. The Board of Finance regularly assesses the potential financial risks and can increase this fund balance through taxes as required. Today, the fund balance has excess reserves of more than $6 million, enough to cover current needs. I think we saw the appropriation process work. The Board of Finance has complimented the Board of Ed and the work specifically by Mr. Rudel and his team in tracking COVID expenses. As we look to build a budget, it is a long time out, 7 months, and a lot of things change. We've also had 2 ESSER grants that have come to the town. Those grants did have conditions around reimbursement specifically tied to unbudgeted and unexpected expenses. We cannot look to the future to base our decision on any grants that we may or may not get or what the conditions might be. But I think we need to think about the big picture. The town has the reserves to continue to work with the Board of Ed in managing these COVID expenses. And the goal should not be to do any unnecessary taxing of the town. The Board of Finance, once we pass our budget, you know, their job is to figure out how to pay for the appropriation. But I think it's important that everyone understands the facts. I think the Board of Finance will continue to support the Board of Ed as we go through and as the rest of the year and the new year unfolds in terms of COVID expenses. With that, I think it's important, and I've asked, I know some folks, we've all been through it, but it's a little different sitting in this chair sometimes. But I think it's important to go over the process that we'll go through here on the add and the cut items. I will go through and make a motion to the specific line item. It may be an increase or a decrease. I will look for a second and any further discussion. We will look for all those in favor, all those opposed, all those abstaining. As we go through that process, if someone makes an amendment, would be an amended motion, and we would need a first and a second on the amended motion. And then the amended motion passes and would supersede the original motion or vote on the original motion. There is also calling the question process, where we have the original motion, a first and a second, a motion to call a question with a second, and then the vote on calling the question must be 2/3 of the board or 6 out of 9 members. If it's a yes vote on the original motion, if it's a no vote, then it's back to the discussion. So that's a lot that I just went through. Mrs. McCammon, Mrs. Ritchie, is there anything you wanted to add to that? And I think we'll, as we go through the process, if some questions come up, we'll work through them. All right.
Are we going to start with the superintendent's recommendation?
I think we start with the order in which it was presented to us, which is the RC 28. Okay. Yes, Dr. Adler.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if the board is, I don't know if the board is okay with the responses they got back. We had a library question, paraprofessional question. I've responded to those. I'd be happy to speak to them further if you feel you would like me to do that at the moment. Or
okay.
We can also discuss.
Or you can do it
as
as
we
you
get to each item.
as you get to them. If you would like me to do that, that's okay too.
What questions?
So, Dr. Adler, go ahead, Dr. Adler, sorry.
But just at the last meeting, I was asked some questions about the librarian and the role of the librarian and how we're going to accommodate that. It was asked about instructional aid and coverage and that type of stuff. We're also asked about the teacher in residence program. Are there other districts that are participating, more than one person in that? And they were included, but I'd be happy to talk to them now, or if when we get to them.
I think as we get to them.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Ackman. I think that makes sense. We can discuss as we get to them. So if we're ready, we'll start with RC 28, line 1. RC 28, account 31000, budget control. Potential change and increase, $362,225, 5 additional sections for social distancing. May I have a motion?
You made the motion.
All right, may I make a motion? Do I have a second? Mrs. Parent? Any discussion? Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. Mrs. Ritchie.
So this is just applying, I just want to make a brief statement about COVID expenses in general. And I think budgeting for probable expenses.
Just make sure you speak in.
Sorry.
Thanks, Deb.
Just want to make sure I get.
Yep.
Budgeting for probable expenses is the most fiscally responsible course of action. This is being honest and transparent with our residents and taxpayers. Our administration has put forth what they feel are probable COVID costs. My goal is to ensure we support our students and staff to continue to deliver full in-person learning starting when school reopens in late August. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ritchie. Any additional discussion or comments? Mrs. Ackman.
I agree. I think that we have the superintendent has identified these. Oh, I'm not done. Sorry. I think that the superintendent and the board have identified costs to open the schools. I think all of us up here, while I speak for myself, I do think it's a shared goal to open our schools full and in person as soon as we can. I think that we have a statutory obligation to include these expenses. And while I certainly understand and appreciate that the Board of Finance moved quickly on our appropriation, I actually don't think that this piece has anything to do with them. I think that they could have a signed check waiting for us, but our obligation is to put in an itemized estimate of known costs, and COVID is one of those. So I appreciate how quickly they moved on the appropriation. I trust that they would always be there for the education of our kids in town. I just think that this is a separate matter than that. So I feel very strongly that COVID need to be in here. I guess I'd look for other opinions, but I think we have an obligation. And I don't think, based on case law, that the town can actually say, don't worry about it, we've got it, as much as they mean that sincerely. So I am really struggling with this. So I would look for fellow board members' opinions.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. Any additional? Mrs. Parent?
I agree with Mrs. Ritchie and Mrs. Ackman. I think that it was pretty clear from Mr. Mooney's conversation Friday morning that the Board of Education has a responsibility when they know of good faith probable expenses to include them in our budget. And I think that it's irresponsible of us to not include COVID expenses. Our administration is telling us that with all certainty, with everything they know, that these expenses will incur. And I agree, the Board of Finance appropriation process did go smoothly, but we should not be relying on them. We need to open our schools with the funds that we need. I feel very strongly that we need to budget for COVID.
Thank you, Mrs. Parent. Any additional conversations? I appreciate, Mrs. Ackman.
So I'll just add, I also think that for our staff, I think that they need to see that we are budgeting and we are preparing. And I think that we have held health and safety always as our first priority. And so as they enter back into school, we need to be prepared for them to do so. So what I'm really struggling with, and this is why I'm trying to be as forthright as I can with this, is I support so much of what's enclosed in this budget. And I don't know how to support a budget without this. And so it's putting me in a very uncomfortable situation. And I think we have got to follow the statute on this.
Say that again, Mrs. Ackman.
I think we have to follow the statute on this.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. Any additional comments? I appreciate any and all comments. I have thought long and hard about this myself as an individual member of the board. Talked to a lot of people. I don't think anyone on this board would not want the schools to open safely, that we would not focus on the safety and health of our students, that we would not give the superintendent and his team the ability to do what they needed to do, whether we had the COVID expenses in the budget or not. I think we know clearly there is a process in place. I struggle with the forecast of what the expenses could be as this continues to change on a daily basis. And I know, knowing everyone on this board, knowing the superintendent, knowing parents in this town, that we would support the superintendent with what the needs are going forward to get those schools open in a safe manner. We've done it. We reacted with lightning speed as this pandemic came upon us to do what we need to do to keep the schools safe. So I understand everyone's struggle with it, and that's my struggle with it. But my view also is a little big picture in terms of the resources that the town has that we can continue to work with and partner with the Board of Finance and the town to get done what we need to get done. Mrs. Ackman.
Respectfully, my view is big picture. My view is big enough picture to know that what the state has contemplated is that we must provide, if we have known costs, that we include them in our budget. That's not a myopic picture. That's looking out. And we do that in every other RC. This RC was presented to us. We know that we will require PPE. PPE is in this. We know that we will require a certain level of cleaning. Cleaning is in this. So I would just respectfully say, I believe this is in line with the state statute. I believe that this is big picture. And I believe in order to support this budget, we must have COVID expenses in it.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. Mr. Cini.
I just made a number of comments at the special meeting on Friday, so I'm not going to reiterate my reasons for the way I'm going to vote. But I do want to point out that the document provided by the school's attorney pointed out one of 20 districts that included COVID expenses. And from what I understand, that was rejected in that one town. So we would be the only district, or one of 2 of 21, that would put forth such a measure. So I just wanted to point out that fact.
So just as a point of clarification, I think our district provided that document, not the attorney. And I don't know about the rejection of another district. I just know that I'm urging the Darium Board of Education to follow statute.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. Any additional comments around this as we move forward? Okay.
Other than we just need to be sure that we have the money to do these things if we need them. I mean, we just, the board asked me to go and find out with the best informed information I had. I did. This is my best recommendation for the expenses. I don't know what other districts are going to be doing, but all I can speak for is our own district again. And I can tell you that it does engender a lot of discussion at the moment, but that's a ancillary comment. But anyway, we have to find a way to be able to do this.
Yes. And I think it's been proven that there are ways out there to do this. So I wouldn't, I don't think this board is going to let you not have the resources that you need to open the schools come the fall, regardless of which way this vote goes.
You have to call the question.
Sure. Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Achman.
We have to vote on, we have to vote on that. We need a first and a second and then a
Yes.
vote.
We need a second.
Thank you. So again, we'll start at the beginning. Thank you all for the
No.
comments.
Is there a second on calling the question?
Is there a
I'm
second?
sorry, I didn't hear.
Call the question.
Move to call the question.
And we need
So
to
is there-
vote on that. So we need a first and a second and then a vote on to call the question.
I will second.
Okay. Right. So all in favor of RC 28, account 31?
No. Vote on calling the question.
All right. All those in favor of calling the question?
So discussion continues.
Discussion ended.
Discussion continues.
Can you tell me who voted? I didn't see.
You and John.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay.
Well, now you need to call for anyone opposed.
Anyone opposed?
And that's Mrs. Parent, Mrs. Stein, Mr. Maroney, and myself. Sorry, and Mrs. Ritchie. Mhm.
We continue discussion.
Okay.
Mrs. Ritchie had her hand raised.
Yes.
I understand there's a process, but from my perspective, I raised this concern very early on, and I think we need to budget appropriately. And I think including COVID expenses is prudent and fiscally responsible. And we are sitting here knowing that our superintendent thinks there are probable costs associated with COVID. And knowing that and knowing our statutory obligation and then rejecting all of these expenses, I think, in my mind, is very concerning because we move forward knowing that we don't have appropriate funding to address the needs that we're going to have to open our schools, I believe, come late August.
Thank you, Mrs. Ritchie. Mrs. Achman?
So I guess my thing is I think the board's considering the wrong question. The question is not whether the town will back us if we have COVID costs. Of course they would. The question is, as a Board of Education, we are obliged to budget for known and or anticipated costs. That is our itemized estimate, which we are charged with bringing forward to the taxpayers of Darien. These are identified costs. So the question is, are we willing to bring forward a budget where we know we have costs and not include them in our budget?
Thank you, Mrs. Achman. Mrs. Parent?
And I agree that I have faith that the Board of Finance will support us, but I also believe that there is a way for us to include this money in the budget and for taxpayers not to be taxed for it if that is the concern. There is a way that the Board of Finance can appropriate a portion through taxing and a portion through other means. But I feel like it is the responsibility to our students and to our staff to include the expenses that our superintendent has suggested we need.
Thank you, Mrs. Parent.
Is that accurate? Is the Board of Finance able, my understanding is that they could not actually by line item allocate.
I believe there was precedent set a few years ago. I don't know.
But a point of order, it's not our decision. How
No,
they
I'm just asking
yeah.
if that was accurate.
There is some history of
Not
them
if you were
using money
deciding.
from general fund, but I don't know it well enough.
I don't know it well enough, but it has
to
been
really
done.
know their mechanisms.
Okay. What's next steps, Deb? Any more discussion? All right. So we call the question.
No.
All right, so we move forward with the
It's already
vote.
been seconded, so now we vote.
There's already second, so
All
now we
right.
just need to vote.
So-
So you want all in favor of line
All-
3100?
Right, all in favor of RC 28, account 3100, $362,225, additional FTE sections for social distancing. So all in favor? That is Mrs. Parent, Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Ackman, and Mrs. Ritchie. All opposed? Mr. Sini, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mr. Deneen, and Mrs. Ackman. So motion, and McCammon. So that motion fails. Moving on, RC 28, COVID account 41003, licensed nurses, $60,480, 2 contracted LPNs for the elementary schools. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Stein?
You make the motion.
I made the motion. Do I have a second? Mrs. Stein. Further discussion?
I would just
Mrs. Ackman.
I would just reiterate for our teaching staff, I think we have to have the correct people in place for them to feel that we are prepared to open schools.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. Further discussion? Move forward on voting. RC 28, account 41003, LPNS, $60,480, 2 contracted LPNS for elementary school. Those in favor? Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Ackman, Mrs. Ritchie, and Mrs. Parent. Those opposed? Mr. Sini, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mr. Deneen, and Mrs. Ackman.
Mrs. McCammon.
Mrs. McCammon, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Okay,
Thank
we
you.
totally look alike.
Thanks for
So it's
keeping,
totally fine.
thanks for, as I look at you and saying thank you for keeping me organized. Thank you. That motion fails. RC 28, part-time custodians, $35,338, part-time custodians for extra cleaning. Do I have a second? Mrs. Parent. Any discussion? We move to a vote on RC 28, account 61001, part-time custodians, $35,338. All those in favor? Mrs. Parent, Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Ackman. All those against? Mr. Sini, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. McCammon. All those abstaining? Mrs. Ritchie. That motion fails. RC 28, account 42001, PPE equipment, $21,250, masks, shields, and gowns. Do I have a second? Mrs. Stein. Any further discussion? Mrs. Ackman.
Just going to do it each time. I believe it's our statutory duty to include these items in the budget.
Can you, I'm sorry, I
I
couldn't hear
believe
you.
it's our statutory duty to include these items in the budget.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. Any further discussion? All those in favor of account 42001, PPE, masks, shells, and gowns, $21,250. Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Ackman, and Mrs. Parent. All those opposed? Mr. Sini, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. McCammon. All those abstaining? Mrs. Ritchie. That motion fails. RC 28, account 65001, custodial supplies, $30,000, disinfectant, rags, and soaps. Do I have a second? Mrs. Ackman. Any discussion? Moving forward on a vote, all those in favor, account 65001, custodial supplies, $30,000. Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Ackman, and Mrs. Parent. All those against? Mr. Sini, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. McCammon. Anyone abstaining? Mrs. Ritchie. RC 28, account 41001, Director of Nursing Stipend, $10,000, contact tracing stipend. Any further discussion? Mrs. Ackman.
Superintendent has said this will be in place. I believe it's our statutory duty to include in the budget.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Mrs. Stein. A vote on account 41001, Director of Nursing Stipend, $10,000. All those in favor? Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Achman, Mrs. Ritchie, Mrs. Parent. All those opposed? Mr. Sini, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. McCammon. Anyone abstaining? You voted for it. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Ritchie. That motion fails. RC 28, account 21603, MS Middlesex lunch monitors, $12,150. 3 lunch monitors to supervise all areas being used as cafeterias. Do I have a second? Mrs. Parent, any discussion? Moving on, all those in favor of RC 28 account 21603 MS lunch monitors, $12,150. Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Achman, Mrs. Parent. All those against? Mr. Sini, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. Ritchie, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. McCammon. That motion fails. RC 28 account 21603 elementary school lunch monitors, $40,500, 10 lunch monitors to supervise all areas being used as cafeterias. Do I have a second? Mrs. Stein, further discussion? Mrs. Achman.
Again, I'm going to argue it's our statutory duty if we want schools open to take the superintendent's recommendation on COVID expenses.
Could you repeat that again? It's just coming through muffled.
Same thing. I believe it's our statutory duty to include these expenses as identified by the superintendent in order to open our schools safely.
Thank you, Mrs. Achman. Moving forward, a vote on RC 28, 21603, elementary school lunch monitors, $40,500. All those in favor? Mrs. Achman, Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Ritchie, Mrs. Parent. All those against? Mr. Sini, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. Achman. That motion does not pass. Mrs. McCammon. I guess I go to who the last person is that spoke. I apologize.
I'm going to be a bit repetitive until
Yeah,
you get to the bottom of this one.
sorry.
Sorry.
RC 28, count 21603, high school lunch monitors, $12,150. That's 3 lunch monitors. Do I have a second? Mrs. Parent, any discussion? All those in favor of RC 28, account 21603, high school lunch monitors, $12,150. Mrs. Achman, Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Parent. All those opposed? Mr. Brown, Mr. Sini, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. Ritchie, Mrs. McCammon, Mr. Deneen. That motion does not move forward. RC 28, account 23004, resource materials, $57,000. Materials for literacy, math, art, music, supplies to prevent the sharing of materials. Do I have a second? Mrs. Achman. Any further discussion? Mrs. Achman.
I believe we need to include this in the budget as recommended by the superintendent due to our statutory obligation.
Thank you, Mrs. Achman. Mr. Sini.
Just a point of clarification, you switch between recommended and identified. Is there a difference?
No, sorry, I'm just, on all of these, I think they should be included.
Right. But
Do.
I guess where I was going, is this recommended or identified by the administration?
So the administration has identified these to us.
Yes,
So I
thank
think
you.
as a board, we must.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. So do I have a second on that? I did, Mrs. Parent, and we're having discussion. Thank you. So we'll move forward on a vote. RC 28, account 23004, resource materials, $57,000. Those in favor? Mrs. Achman, Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Parent. Those opposed? Mr. Brown, Mr. Sini, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. Ritchie, Mr. Deneen, and Mrs. McCammon. That motion does not move forward. RC 28, account 74030, storage boxes, $32,163. The storage boxes to store furniture and maximize space in the classroom. Do I have a second? Mrs. Achman, any further discussion? We'll move forward on a vote. RC 28, account 74030, storage boxes, $32,163. All those in favor? Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Achman, Mrs. Ritchie, Mrs. Parent. All those opposed? Mr. Sini, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. McCammon. That motion does not move forward. RC 28, account 102001, YMCA Girls Swimming, $67,860. Fee to use YMCA should buildings not be rented out. Do I have a second? Mrs. Ackman, further discussion? We'll move forward on a vote. RC 28, account 102001, YMCA Girls Swimming, $67,860. All those in favor? Mrs. Ackman? All those opposed? Mr. Sini, Mrs. Stein, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. Ritchie, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. McCammon, Mrs. Parent. That motion does not move forward. Thank you. RC 28, account 21607, contribution to food service account, $85,590. Social distancing would limit food options, reducing sales and solvency of funds. Do I have a second? Mrs. Ackman, any further conversation? We'll move forward on voting. RC 28, account 21607, contribution to food service account, $85,590. All those in favor? Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Ackman. All those opposed? Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. Ritchie, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. McCammon, Mrs. Parent, and Mr. Sini. That motion does not move forward. That completes RC 28, COVID expenses. Rich, I'm assuming you've got your interactive spreadsheet there as we go through the process?
Yep.
Thank you. We will move on to RC1, Darium High School, account 110118, English teachers, $57,956. Restore 0.80 FTE for team teaching. Do I have a second? Mrs. Stein, any discussion? All right, move forward with a vote. All those in favor, DHS account 110118, English teachers, $57,956. Mr. Sini, Mrs. Ackman, Mr. Brown,
Unanimous
Mrs.
vote.
Ackman, Mrs.
Unanimous.
Stein. It's unanimous. Thank you. That motion carries forward. Thank you. RC 25, account 82003, health insurance, $22,045. The benefits for the English team teaching. Do I have a second? Mrs. Stein. Any discussion? Move forward, a vote on account 82003, RC 25 health insurance for $22,045 for the English teaching. Mr. Sini.
It's unanimous.
It's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you for helping to keep things moving. Thank
Can we
you.
take the next two in together?
Yeah,
Since
actually,
I don't think we're going to hire a
Good
teacher
point.
without
Right, I mean,
a-
that's,
without health
they really do.
insurance.
Good point. Thank you.
Why don't you make a motion for both lines at the same
Yeah.
time?
Okay, good. All right, I will make a motion for RC1, account 110142, social studies teachers, $57,956, restore 0.80 FTE for team teaching. With that, RC 25, account 82003, health insurance of $22,045 for that 0.80 FTE for team teaching. Do I have a second? Mr. Sini, any discussion? Move forward on a vote for those two. That is unanimous. Thank you. Moving forward, I'll do these two together again. Also, RC1, Darium High School, account 21603, teacher's aid, $40,709. Restore second library paraprofessional. And then RC 25, account 82003, the associated health insurance with that position of $22,045. Do I have a second? Mrs. Achman. Move forward on a vote for.
Well, I think the discussion.
Discussion,
Dr.
sorry.
Adler said he had
Thank you.
information.
Yeah, because I'm guessing these sort of come as a package too, so to speak, whenever you hit upon them. So, so the question that I had was really about the library and the librarian and reducing one librarian at the middle school and reducing one of the librarian paraprofessionals at the high school. There is a wee bit of an offset at the high school because there's 0.2 of a librarian that we're actually getting back at the high school. It's in this budget. That has been reassigned to our Director of Informational Technology. That's a 0.2 position that ordinarily the librarian wouldn't actually be functioning as a librarian. So that is already in the budget per se. For the middle school, mostly the paraprofessionals do management type work, also assisting with student supervision and groups who are actually in the library. So that's really one of the bigger functions for them. Circulation, shelving, that type of managerial work. The librarians, certainly 2 librarians at the middle school, reducing that to 1. Some of the librarians at the moment already do some of the management work, so that will be collapsed into sort of prioritizing the work for the library paraprofessional to do that work. There is a lot of work also that is around technology, the maintenance of technology, the troubleshooting of technology. We would increase the use of the technology technician at the middle school to assist with that. We also have increased the technology technician this year. So we'd make sure that those services, we'd reassign some of those services. Yes, the media specialist at the middle school pushes into some classes. But generally speaking, when a classroom comes down, or a class comes down, it generally comes down with the classroom teacher. So the paraprofessional will be able to assist in that capacity. So we do feel as if we would be able to adequately supervise and manage the work here. Yes, there will be different types of priority scheduling for media specialists. I was asked a question about the Library Reimagined. The Library Reimagined, the functions of the Library Reimagined will still be in place. That's a learning commons concept that we're putting in place with instructional zones, print collections, and those other interactive zones. So the actual work and function of the library for Library Reimagined will still take place. So that's not going to change. So we do feel as if we can manage this and cover it appropriately with a little bit of reassignment of the work to technology, and also a wee bit of a reassignment of the work for the paraprofessional and the library media specialists who are in the.
Mr. Denny.
Yes, Mrs. Achman.
So,
Thank you.
Dr. Adley, my question around this was, do we believe that the para that's moving from the high school to the middle school can assume the duties of the library media specialist? And or if not, what are we losing in terms of services to children? And what was the driver for this change?
So the second librarian also assumes some managerial responsibilities and supervisory responsibilities, which we would delegate to the paraprofessional. So that we feel as if we can manage that. So I'm not proposing something I don't think we can manage. If you'd want to put it, like if ideally you'd want to put in 3 media specialists or 2 media specialists, certainly, certainly a qualified person, a certified person, I should say, over an uncertified person brings a different level of expertise. But given the tasks that are taking place and given some of the resources that we have, I think we can manage and redistribute them adequately.
Any further discussion? Thank you, Dr. Adley. So moving forward on a vote on RC1, Darium High School Teacher's Aid, $40,709, restore second library paraprofessional, and RC25, account 2003, the associated health insurance for $22,045. All those in favor? All those opposed? That is unanimous. Thank you. We'll move forward. RC1, Darium High School, account 21306, Teacher of the Gifted. This is a decrease of $14,953 for the Talented and Gifted program at the high school. Do I have a second? Mrs. Ritchie, any further discussion? Mr. Brown.
I would just like to say I welcome further conversation, but everything I've heard to date makes me think this is a valuable program for the participants, and I don't support this cut. Thank you.
Could you just say that again, how you ended that, Mr.
Oh,
Brown?
I ended that by saying I do not support this cut.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Mrs. Ritchie.
So at this point in time, I did second this, but I just wanted to briefly say that because of the full review that we're going to hopefully do for the IDEA program, I, at this point, will not support the cut, but I do hope that we will have a really good overview of the IDEA program and something substantial to look at sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ritchie. We'll move forward with the vote on RC1 Darium High School, account 21306, Teacher of the Gifted, a cut for $14,953. Those all in favor of supporting that cut? Those opposed? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Rich, if whatever you need,
Nope, I got it.
Hopefully I don't want to be moving too fast because I want the discussion. Thank you. We'll take the next two together also. This is Dr. Adley had further discussion on this. RC3, Middlesex Middle School, account 21401 librarians, $105,863. Restore the one FTE library media specialist. RC25, account 82003, the Associated Health Insurance for that library media specialist at $22,045. Do I have a second on that? Mrs. McCammon, any further discussion? All those will go to a vote. All those in favor of RC3, account 21401 librarians, $105,863 to restore the library and media specialist, and RC25, account 82003, the Associated Health Insurance, $22,045. All in favor? Mr. Brown? All those opposed? Mr. Sini, Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Achman, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. Ritchie, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. McCammon, and Mrs. Parent. That motion does not move forward. So should we take these together also? One kind of wipes the other one out if we go forward with it. Is everyone comfortable with that? As we go through the elementary schools? Okay. So RC5, Hinley, account 21603, teacher aid, adding back in $39,230 to restore the instructional para. In RC5, Hinley, account 21608, lunch monitor, a decrease of $32,400 to remove the lunch monitor. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Stein, further discussion?
Yeah.
Yes, Mrs. McCammon.
You have some points on this, right?
Yes, I think I just speak to this perhaps as simply as I can. Supervision will be covered, and when we look at the trade-off here, we have two lunch monitors for each paraprofessional or teacher aide. So the two lunch monitors will cover basically the two lunch monitors instead of the paraprofessional will cover essentially 6 hours of lunch supervision. That means that paraprofessionals not there would be able to be, the other paraprofessionals would be able to be in the actual classroom. So you're really sort of gaining it back, so to speak. It's a bit of a wash, which was articulated in the budget book that we have published. So it's a wee bit of a wash in that regard. So the timing of the actual time that people are in a classroom or in a supervisory capacity. Instead of them being in a supervisory capacity for that amount of time, the lunch monitors are covering that particular time, which is like 6 hours, which is like a paraprofessional, because if you don't have lunch monitors, there's going to be paraprofessionals in there for that 6 hours, right? So it's not a complete wash, but it's more or less. So it's very, to us, it's very manageable to cover.
Any further discussion? Mrs. Parent.
I'm going to vote to restore these paras because I do feel that consistency is important, and the lunch monitor job tends to be more transient. And I think in these extraordinary times, I think the more consistency for our youngest learners is best. And I think we should restore these paras.
Thank you, Mrs. Parent. Mrs. McCammon.
I feel mixed on this as a person for the reasons Mrs. Parent raises, but I also know that one of the major concerns typically during the elementary school day is coverage at lunch and coverage at recess. There's a lot of discussion about, making sure that there's adults on the playground and enough of them at recess. And then at lunch, there was historically been some conversation about people being pulled off of or special education paraprofessionals having to cover lunch or recess at times. Can you address either of those concerns and whether this helps with those questions?
So this is not dependent upon special education paraprofessionals being in the lunchroom. But in general, that they are going to be, there are paraprofessionals who are going to be. And I would say also just, you tangentially get a benefit from that, but if we're not planning on that, that's not it, right? And for the what am I looking for recess? Thank you very much. For recess, with the paraprofessionals and the teachers, there's a rotation that the administrators do, and they're able to cover that.
Could I add a follow-up?
Yes, Mrs. McCammon.
Mrs. Klein.
Mrs. Klein.
If I may just add to that, to Mrs. McCann's question, there are paraprofessionals who are assigned to students for recess and lunch. It's part of their IEP and the recommendation from PPT, and that will not change. And they are designed by the PPT recommendation.
Thank you, Mrs. Klein. Mrs. McCammon.
So pursuant to that, one of the complaints we sometimes hear, or the concerns we sometimes hear, is that there isn't an instructional paraprofessional available, and therefore a paraprofessional who's assigned to a student ends up being the supervisory person. I think it's a school building. It's, there are always going to be moments where we have to be flexible, but I was just curious if that helps with that situation at all.
All I can tell you is that through the rotational schedule that a principal would do with the faculty that they have staff, teaching faculty and the paraprofessionals, we feel that we can cover that adequately without unduly imposing upon a special education paraprofessional.
Yes, Mrs. McCammon.
The other point, and we talked about this a little bit last time, but in terms of the transient nature, would you address that again? We've had the same lunch month. How much turnover we had this year, and what are you thinking about for next year?
I'll let Rich sort of describe a wee bit about it, but I've been pleasantly surprised that we have had some consistency and enough where we feel as if we can put this proposal forward. Because I do agree with Mrs. Parent, yourself, and probably everybody, a familiar face is welcome with the young kids. Actually, a familiar face is welcome with any children, no matter what grade they are. But if it was so transient, right, and so undependable, it certainly wouldn't put it forward. But can you comment on just the turnover, please, Jeff?
So we have barely had any turnover. We intentionally, I think is the word I'm looking for, intentionally set the rate at an hourly rate that make it worth people coming in for 3 hours a day. So we haven't seen any turnover. I think there was one whose regular John came back, but otherwise people are happy to get that 3 hours for what we pay.
Good information. Thank you. Further discussion? Just to clarify also, I think as we go through this, there are actually 3 line items for each school. There's the account for the role itself, the account for the monitor, replacing the aid, and there's also the associated health insurance. So we'll go through it like that.
So at this point, the motion on the table is the 2, and then so we have to do the 2 and the 1, and then going forward, we can do all 3.
Sure. Thank you. So no further discussion. So going forward on a vote on RC 5, 21603 teacher's aid, $39,230, restoring the instructional para. RC 5, account 21608, the lunch monitor, a decrease of $32,400. All those in favor? Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Achman, Mrs. Parent. All those opposed? Mr. Sini, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. Ritchie, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. McCammon. That motion does not move forward. A line item on this one, the RC 25, account 82003, the health insurance, $22,540, the benefits for the instructional para. So second, Mrs. Stein, any discussion on that? A vote on RC 25, account 82. Yeah, sorry, Mrs. Achman, go ahead.
I got a little lost, but on the same topic, I just would like to hear from Mr. Tranberg or Dr. Adley about, as we welcome kids back into the building again, hopefully full time. Do we see value in having people there throughout the day that they know? And do we think that that's good educationally? I guess my point is pairs are there throughout the school day and serve children in class in the lunchroom. And is there a value to that, as we've heard that we have children, we're welcoming them back into a school environment and there are associated needs just with that?
I would always say there's a value to that. I wouldn't be certain, well, I would never be disingenuous, but I would never say, there would always be a value to that. However, if there's consistency in the lunch monitors, I feel very comfortable with that model. If there's inconsistency in the lunch monitors, that's a different matter.
Any further discussion? Thank you, Mrs. Achman. So voting on 82003, health insurance, $22,540. So all in favor, Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Achman, Mrs. Parent, all those opposed, Mr. Brown, Mr. Sini, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. Ritchie, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. McCammon. That does not move forward. The next, RC 7 homes, account 21603 teacher's aid, $39,230 to restore the instructional para. Same RC 7 homes, account 21608 lunch monitor, decrease of $32,400 to remove the lunch monitor. And RC 25, account 82003 health insurance, $22,540 benefits for the instructional para. Do I have a second? Mrs. Achman. Moving on a vote. Vote in favor of homes 21603, the teacher's aid, $39,230, restoring the instructional para. RC 7 homes 21608, removing the lunch monitor for $32,400, and the associated health insurance in RT 25 82003 for $22,540. All those in favor, Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Achman, and Mrs. Parent. All those opposed, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. Ritchie, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. McCammon, Mr. Sini. That motion does not move forward. RC 8 Ox Ridge, account 21603 teacher's aid, $39,230, restoring the instructional para. RC 8 Ox Ridge, account 21608, the lunch monitor, decreasing $32,400 to remove the lunch monitor. And the associated RC 25 fixed health insurance costs, account 82003, $22,540. Do I have a second? Mrs. Stein, any discussion? Move forward on a vote for those three items. Again, RC 8 Ox Ridge, account 21603 teacher's aid to restore it, $39,230. RC 8 Ox Ridge, account 21608 lunch monitor, a decrease of $32,400. And RC 25, account 82003, the associated health insurance, $22,540. All those in favor, Mrs. Achman, Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Parent. All those opposed, Mr. Sini, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. Ritchie, Mr. Deneen, and Mrs. McCammon. That does not move forward. RC9, Royal, account 21603, teacher's aid, $39,230, restore the instructional para. RC9 Royal, account 21608, lunch monitor, decrease 32,400, removing the lunch monitor. RC25, account 82003, health insurance, 22,540, benefits for the instructional para. Do I have a second, Mrs. Stein? Any further discussion? Moving to a vote on RC9 Royal, account 21603, for restoring the instructional para, $39,230. RC9 account 21608, removing the lunch monitor, $32,400. And RC25 account 82003, health insurance for the para, $22,540. All those in favor? Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Achman, and Mrs. Parent. All those opposed? Mr. Sini, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. Ritchie, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. McCammon. That does not move forward. RC10, Tokenique, account 21603, restoring the para, $39,230. RC10, Tokenique, account 21608, removing the lunch monitor, $32,400. And RC25, 82003, the health insurance for the instructional para, $22,540. Do I have a second? Mrs. Stein. Any discussion? All those in favor of RC10 Tokenique, account 21603, restoring the para, $39,230. RC10 Tokenique, account 21608, lunch monitor, removing $32,400. And RC25, account 82003, the associated health insurance, $22,540 with the para. All those in favor? Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Achman, Mrs. Parent. All those opposed? Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. Ritchie, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. McCammon. All those abstaining? Mr. Sini? Where are you at? All right, are you good, Jill, on that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. We've moved through the elementary schools and the para. RC11, athletics, account 102001, interscholastic, a decrease of $3,150. This is the fee for girls swimming. Do I have a second? Okay, so I don't have a second. I don't need any discussion. Motion fails. Thank you. RC11, athletics, account 102001, interscholastic, decrease of $3,850, fee for girls diving. Do I have a second? I do not. Motion fails. Thank you. RC11, athletics, account 102001, interscholastic, $3,850, fee for boys diving. Do I have a second? No. Motion fails. Thank you. RC11, athletics, account 101008, intramurals elementary school, $10,329. This has to do with intramurals. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Do I have a second? Thank you. I do not have a second. Thank you. That motion fails. RC12, maintenance, account 12001, consultant services, a decrease of $200,000, eliminate the building conditions survey. Do I have a second? Mr. Sini. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor are, yes, sorry, Mrs. Ritchie.
So I do think this is a deferral in my mind, where I'd like to see this, Dr. Adley, and I hope other board members agree, I would like to see this item back in the budget next year, when hopefully we don't have as much budget pressure, but I do think this at some point will need to, this building condition survey will need to occur.
Thank you, Mrs. Ritchie. And if I could just add, as we go through the facilities committee meeting, you'll see the incredible amount of work that was done by the administration relative to the schools and the library redesign and the removing of the portables. And I think it will make sense to revisit this next year and take all that work into consideration as we develop the next building condition survey. So thank you. Mr. Maroney.
I would like to second both of you and just add that this is an endorsement of Mr. Lynch and his department of how well they run our facilities, that we believe or I believe that we can defer this for a year.
Thank you, Mr. Maroney. We'll move forward. All in favor, RC 12, account 12001, consultant services, a decrease of 200,000 for the building condition survey. That is unanimous. Thank you. RC 15, technology, account 123021, new computer equipment, a decrease of $88,400, elimination of the first grade displays. Do I have a second? So that motion fails. All right, thank you. Moving along, RC 15 technology, account 123021, new computer equipment, a decrease of $10,065, eliminate non-classroom teacher desktop replacements. Do I have a second? Mrs. Ritchie. Further discussion? Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. McCammon.
Alan, can you or someone on your staff briefly just address what they believe the impact of this would be?
Well, this is we'd be replacing the desktops with this. Sorry, this the art one. Sorry, I'm just looking up here.
This is for the specials teachers.
For
of
the special teachers. Sorry, yes. I just think I don't know what the message is, right? I mean, yes, it will limp along with the other ones, but I just don't know that that's a good message to send in terms of these other departments. But they're as transient with the information and need that type of technology flexibility. I mean, some of these art teachers we've had professional development. They've got software included in the budget right away, right? That they're going to use and so on and so forth. So we would have to make do, right? But it's not ideal by any means, and I relatively just don't think that noting these specials is a good message to the staff.
Thank you, Dr. Adley. Any further conversation? Moving forward on a vote, RC 15, technology, account 123021, new computer equipment, a decrease of $10,065 to eliminate non-classroom teacher desktop replacements. All those in favor? That is unanimous, so that does not pass. All those opposed? Thank you. That is unanimous. Thank you. RC 15 technology, account 123021, new computer equipment, a decrease of $11,760, reducing 24 iPads. Do I have a second? Mrs. Ritchie, discussion? Mr. Sini.
Can I just ask a reminder, what was the 24 significance? Why was the number 24 picked?
It's now reflective of the actual enrollment plus extra for some that mean if they're breaking.
Thank you.
I reduced it to reflect enrollment, but kept some extra in there.
Got it. Thank you.
Dr. Adley, any?
No, that's true.
Okay. All right. We'll move forward on RC 15, account 123021, new computer equipment, a decrease of $11,760, which equates to 24 iPads. All those in favor? Mr. Sini, Mrs. Stein, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. Ritchie, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. McCammon, and Mrs. Parent. All those opposed? Mr. Brown and Mrs. Achman. That motion moves forward. Moving along. RC 16, administration, account 12001, consultant services, a decrease of $10,000 to eliminate the demography report for enrollment projections. Do I have a second? Mrs. Achman. Further discussion? Mrs. McCammon.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I said this last time, so just quickly again, I get why this is on the list. I know we were waiting for the census numbers to come in, and with open choice coming up, I feel like it's a good time to have some precision.
Thank you. Any further comment, Dr. Adley?
I would just add that along the lines of that precision, with hopefully the cranking up of the facilities projects, that I wonder if this is the best year to do that as well, because that's even more important during this time of planning for facility projects.
Thank you, Dr. Adley. Mrs. Ockman.
So I would just say I put this on the table because we had a full comprehensive report this year that took into account many of the builds in town. And I think we've always been quite precise on our kindergarten. So if we're prepared to defer our building condition study, I certainly think that this could also be deferred to, at the very least, in every other year. We have never done an every year process. So if we're going to defer our buildings for a year, I think we certainly can rely on our previous methods for a year.
Thank you, Mrs. Ockman.
If I could just make one
Yes,
correct,
Dr.
just for the record, and if I'm not referencing anybody or any departments, but the claim of the scheduling or projections of kindergartens have not played out over the years, but just for the record, that's all.
So I think I would just say I stand by our numbers and our 3 models, but we also had this report last year. So if we're on the world of deferrals due to some perceived budget pressure, which I don't quite understand, then that's why I have this on the list.
Thank you, Mrs. Ockman. Further discussion? We'll move forward on RC 16, account 12001 consultant services, a decrease of $10,000 for the demography report. All those in favor? Mr. Sini, Mrs. Ockman, Mrs. Stein, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. Ritchie, Mr. Deneen, and Mrs. Parent. All those opposed? Mr. Brown and Mrs. McCammon. So that motion fails. Passes. Correct. Sorry. I got to read my minuses and pluses, right? Yep. So we are on,
pardon me.
So RC 18, personnel, 21301, classroom teacher, $47,184. This is to add a second teacher to the teacher in residence. RC 18, account 13013, dues and memberships, $10,750. It's the correct partnership fee for the second teacher in residence. In RC 25, account 82003, health insurance, $22,788 is the health benefits for the second teacher in residence. Do I have a second? Mrs. Parent, discussion. Okay. Yes, Mrs. McCammon.
Alan, would you please go through what you prepared for tonight?
What I prepared for? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. I think we do have a response to that. Thank you very much. So the question to remind you, how many districts that participate in the teacher residence program host 2 teachers? It seems that 12 residents were hosted by CREC, so that would seem about 6 particular districts. CREC hosted 10 teachers, and both Southington and Bristol hosted 2 teachers. That's the only 2 districts, Marge, that hosted 2?
That was this year, CREC in the 2 districts.
And so for 21-22 next year, 7 districts are planning on 1 resident, 11 are planning on 2, and 1 district is planning for 3, and there's 2 districts that are planning for 4. So we'd be right in amongst that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Further discussion? All right, move forward on RC 18, account 21301, classroom teacher, $47,184 for the second teacher in residence. RC 18, account 13013, the dues and memberships to CREC for that second teacher in residence. And RC 25, account 82003, the associated health insurance, $22,788 for the second teacher in residence. All those in favor? Mrs. Stein, Mr. Brown, Mrs. Ockman, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. Ritchie, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. McCammon, and Mrs. Parent. All those opposed? Mr. Sini. That motion moves forward. Thank you. RC 18, personnel, account 31000, budget control, a decrease of $144,890. reducing budget control from 4 teachers to 2 teachers. Do I have a second? Mr. Sini. Further discussion? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, Mrs. McCammon.
Sorry, let me get seen. Okay. Yeah, I just would like to note, I think that we need to talk about our reserve strategy going forward. I think we found out this year that we have the ability to be more flexible than we thought. And I just think we need to, whatever we do this year, I think that we need to note that we are still committed to small class size, but we may have options other than just budget control. Thank you.
Mrs. Achman.
Just a point of clarification, Board of Educations don't hold reserves?
Excuse me?
Board of Educations don't hold reserves.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. Thank you.
Okay. On budget control, I just think when you look at the enrollment and the class sizes and the potential breaks out there, I don't think it's the year to, get into a big discussion around budget control. I think it has proved that it's helped the superintendent in the past. I think it makes sense based on where we see the breaks in the enrollment right now. I'll leave it at that. We'll move forward on a vote. Yes, Mrs. McCammon.
I should have added, the other thing that I think we need to talk about as part of that discussion is budget control for enrollment versus versus how we plan for other things, because we've used it sometimes for special education and sometimes for enrollment. And those might be, enrollment's a very different animal than special education, which is typically not as predictable.
Thank you, Mrs. McCammon. Mr. Sini.
And I take your comments seriously, but historically, over the last 4 years, we've only gotten an average of 33% after you adjust for last year's numbers. So it's definitely worthy of discussion going forward.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Sini. Any further discussion? Move forward on RC 18 personnel, account 31000 budget control, a decrease of $144,890, decreasing budget control from 4 teachers to 2 teachers. All those in favor? Mr. Sini, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, and Mrs. McCammon. All those opposed? Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Achman, Mrs. Ritchie, Mr. Deneen, and Mrs. Parent. Sorry, Mrs. Parent. That motion does not move forward. RC 24, account 21309, contracted occupational therapy, an increase of $10,257 to restore the variance. Do I have a second? Mrs. Achman, further discussion? Moving forward, RC 24, special ed, account 21309, contracted occupational therapy, restoring the variance of $10,257. All those in favor? Mr. Brown?
Sorry.
That's all right. Mr. Sini, Mrs. Stein, Mr. Brown, Mrs. Achman, Mrs. Ritchie, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. McCammon, and Mrs. Parent. That motion, all those opposed? Mr. Maroney, that motion moves forward. Thank you. RC 24, special education, 21311, contracted physical therapy, $7,589 increase to restore the variance. Do I have a second? Mrs. Achman, further discussion? All right, moving forward on RC 24, special ed, account 21311, contracted physical therapy to restore the variance of $7,589. All those in favor? Mrs. Stein, Mr. Brown, Mr. Sini, Mrs. Achman, Mrs. Ritchie, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. McCammon, and Mrs. Parent. All those opposed? Mr. Maroney, and that motion moves forward. Thank you. RC 24. Account RC 24, special education, account 21407, SESS assistant principals, a decrease of $710,058. Eliminate the SES assistant principals. Do I have a?
Should we do these two together?
Yes. Yep. Thank you. RC 24, special education, account 21407, SES facilitators, an increase of $563,472 to restore the CES facilitators. Do I have a second? Mr. Maroney. Any discussion? Mr. Maroney.
Dr. Adley, in our last meeting, you said, and I think I'm quoting this, you won't get this again if it doesn't move forward. Could you elaborate on what you meant by that?
I think this is a unique opportunity to put it on the table. When you talk about administrators in any capacity, it engenders emotions and much discussion, as it should do. Haven't had this discussion. I think the time is now right. I also actually started in a prior meeting, and I spoke to the fact leadership versus management. If there's one thing I've learned through this pandemic, it's clearly obvious where leadership is necessary versus simple management. I don't want to I certainly don't say it in any disparaging way, but this is an opportunity to exercise that, Dennis. I think the board has had a real rigorous and thoughtful, comprehensive review of the program, and I think the timing is right and necessary for our kids.
Any further discussion? Mrs. McCammon.
I was curious, well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to the many parents who commented on this. I think that, there were concerns that we were circumventing the process, but I hope that there's an understanding now that this was really just an opportunity to ask for a little bit more conversation. I have more thoughts on that maybe when we get to the master agenda part, but I would like to know, Shirley, you had that quote from CES that I really appreciate at the end of your presentation. I wondered if any other inclusion specialists were involved in this decision.
Did you hear the question, Mrs. Klein?
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
It depends on who you're citing as inclusion specialists, Mrs. McCann. If there are people outside of the district or if they're people who are well known, it was really an internal conversation, but we did reach out, as I said, to families who've been in districts where they had that. But there were no other experts. I do want to just say today, because I know it was quoted, if you allow, it was quoted earlier today in one of the presentations that was said about an inclusion specialist from the NYU program from NEST. And it was interesting when she said today in her presentation that what's most important, can you imagine if everyone were experts? And I just want to take that opportunity to again say that the notion of having someone with expertise in this kind of instruction and teaching and learning affords that opportunity to all stakeholders in the building. And it is consistent, although it wasn't with that expert, but she did confirm again today, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had that opportunity? And that's precisely what our intention is. So to answer your question, we didn't enlist her, but we did get to hear from her today.
May I just follow up on that, Jill? I said from day one when it got to this district, the expertise that is in this district, you don't need to look any further than the people you have in this district for experts. Like, to a person, the administration and everybody who works in the special education department, I'll say to a person, right? But they support this model. And they are our experts. Actually, we are our experts, right? So I understand that occasionally we will go out for expert, but when it's so clear and so so much supported within the experts that we have within the department and within the district, I don't know that you have to look too much further than that personally, but.
Mrs. McCammon.
One more question. Thank you. And Shirley, I was also at that presentation. It was fantastic. The quote I wrote down was that it's less about building individual supports, but more about how we do things in our class. And that's how you get to universal design. And I thought that was something I'm excited to be thinking about. In both.
I'm going to share my quote also, and I did hang on to that one as well. That was a takeaway, Ms. McCann. The one I was quoting was, and I quote, "What if every administrator had the tools to support neurodiverse learners?" And that's what our intention would be.
So Shirley, could we pick up on that? Because one of the questions that I have been asked repeatedly is, what happens if something goes wrong with the special ed AP? They have to leave, or a parent disagrees. How do we ensure that the rest of the building does indeed have that expertise? I understand, some of the things you've outlined in your presentation, but if you could help me to understand it a little better operationally. This is a bit of a change in reporting structure, and I just, again, I continue to hear that question. Is that clear?
Yes, well, it may not be clear, but this might be the answer. It's the same thing about capacity and collaboration. So it should never be one person who holds the key to all of this. It should be people who turnkey it and share it among our colleagues. So I don't know that one person will be the key holder to it. I'm hoping, and our intention is that all of these expertise will be shared. So if one person leaves, hopefully we've scaffolded, we've developed, we've shared best practices, we've looked at strategies, methodology, and it becomes the capacity of all of the stakeholders in the building, not just that one person who brought it with them. I think it also, as Dr. Adley said, I do want to comment that I don't know, again, what constitutes an expert, but I do believe that our resources, our psychologists, our OTs, our PTs, our special education teachers, our general education teachers, and our administrators are practitioners of best practice, and they hold expertise as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Klein. Mrs. Achman.
So I would just say the way our budget works is we don't budget bodies or personalities, we budget FTEs, full-time equivalents. So it's much like our psychologists. We may have one in special ed and one in general ed, but we don't believe that one psychologist is the one dealing with all of special ed. The full-time equivalent, what we're budgeting for, does. But the two psychologists might share caseloads. So arguably, I would offer that same thing within if we have two APs, one who has an expertise, we're hoping they're sharing and learning amongst their administrators, but it's not as if only one AP is going to deal with special education. The full-time equivalent of that position and how we need to budget will handle that. So I do think it's like when Mrs. McCann, my thought would be, as the layperson, not the expert, would be if someone leaves the building, it's like when a principal leaves the building, the AP assumes the duties. So hopefully this helps elevate our whole administrative level. But I do think as a budget, we're budgeting FTEs, not bodies or personalities.
Mrs. Ritchie.
So on the budgeting of this, I think maybe at some point, if others feel it's appropriate, that we could have a discussion about where, if the SES APs remain in the budget, where they should reside. Do they stay in RC24? Should we have a discussion about bringing them down to the RCs for the elementary schools? So just something for the board to consider.
Thank you, Mrs. Ritchie. Any further, Mrs. McCammon?
Yes, and kind of related to both Ms. Achman's and Ms. Ritchie's points, I think some of the ways that some parents have read it at first, even myself trying to think through it. Can we just clarify, if we have a child with an IEP, are they split between people? Are they only going to the AP of special ed? Is that how it works? Or is it truly, I'm just pushing on the point Mrs. Achman is making.
May I respond to that, Dr. Adley?
Thank you, Mrs. Klein.
No, it's not a silo, and I hope we did speak to that originally also, Mrs. McCammon. It's not a silo. In fact, there are already existing relationships within buildings between principals and assistant principals, often with siblings of families, and I think we did cite before, it's families that are there and families that are yet to come. So there won't be this silo where you're designated. What our intention is to have the expertise of the new person, an assistant principal, to share that with his or her colleagues and to assure that all students access and have the benefit of their knowledge and expertise, but it will not be in a silo.
Thank you, Mrs. Klein. Any further conversation? Mr. Ritchie, Mr. Maroney. Maybe I need your glasses.
I would just like to thank the board and the community for allowing the discussion to happen this week. I think it's been very insightful, as well as hearing Dr. Adley and Mrs. Klein speak behind their fervent belief that this is the right thing to do. And I personally think as well, I think you guys have made believers out of me, but we will be watching. I think part of me hearing the comments last week brought me back to when I was listening to the GAM report. It just made me very nervous that we're going back down the same road where there's a group of parents who are are fighting out against this, and people are saying it's the right thing to do, and there became a give and take. But this is a different administration, and I think we're putting our trust in you to do the right thing for children. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maroney. All right, moving along. So we will go down RC 24 Special Ed, account 21407, CES Assistant Principals, a decrease of $710,058 to eliminate the CES Assistant Principals. RC 24 Special Ed, account 21407, CES Facilitators, an increase of $563,472 to restore the CES Facilitators. Do I have a second? So that, taking a second.
Yeah.
All right. All those in, thank you. All those in favor? All those opposed? That is unanimous, so that motion fails. Thank you. RC 25, account 52001, regular transportation, an increase of $176,904 to add 2 additional buses. Do I have a second? Mrs. Parent, further discussion. Mrs. Achman.
I would just say, sitting on the policy committee, I did not support a policy change because I think that that's a very broad stroke. But I think that we do now have data from several years, both COVID and non-COVID. I think what we're missing is rider experience. So I'm not willing to put these in forever if we find out that kids aren't riding the bus, but we're hearing that there's a need for the bus. So I think this board has a choice to make an investment, see what rider experience actually is. But I don't support a policy change unless we have that, so.
Thank you, Mrs. Achman. Mrs. Ritchie.
I would just hope that members who had requested data or more information that they could potentially be more specific about what they're looking for so we can continue this discussion because I still go back to, I think we need to, whether or not we change a policy, I think a 1.5 mile radius is more appropriate for our town as it is structured, and I would like to continue those discussions.
Thank you, Mrs. Ritchie. Mrs. Parent.
I agree with the 1.5 mile. I think that is appropriate for our town. So I look forward to potentially discussing that further. And I would just like to thank the parents who have advocated for these for the past few years. I think it's been done in a respectful and thoughtful manner. So thank you for all those for sharing your comments.
Well said, Mrs. Parent. Thank you. Mrs. McCammon.
I just would like to say that I support actually 1.5 miles. My concern is if we run this as a trial during a post-pandemic year, it's going to fail. And I think that I'd also like to say if what we're looking at is how to assess demand and how this relates to general ridership, we should run something that looks at the entire district in terms of ridership. I still want to know if there's other modalities we can be thinking about and also incorporating our thoughts about security and traffic on the school property. So I think, I still think conversation remains that is why I won't be voting yes tonight, but I look forward to the discussion as soon as we can have it.
Thank you, Mrs. McCammon. Any further discussion, Mrs. Achman?
So I would just say I'm a little confused and I'll go back and look in the minutes, but there was a motion put up about changing the policy. It was defeated and yet now people are supporting changing the policy. So clearly this needs more conversation.
Yes.
As a board, but then I think with all due haste, that
Thank you, Mrs.
conversation needs to
Achman.
occur.
Any further conversation? We'll move forward on RC 25, account 52001, regular transportation, an increase of $176,904 to add 2 additional budgets, to add 2 additional buses. All those in favor? Mrs. Stein, Mrs. Achman, and Mrs. Parent. All those opposed? Mr. Sini, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. Ritchie, Mr. Deneen, and Mrs. McCammon. That motion does not move forward. Moving along on capital.
Should we just, I'm
Yes.
sorry, should we get an update from Rich? where
Sure,
we are?
thank you,
Just
Mrs.
to-
Ritchie. Yes, we are moving into the capital. So,
So
Mr. Rudel.
So the total changes were an increase of 36,810. That would bring the budget to $106,624,199, or 4.03%.
So Rich, can you say that at about
Yes.
a tenth of the speed?
So start from the beginning. Thanks, Rich.
So the total net changes were an increase of $36,810. That brings the budget to $106,624,199, or a 4.03% increase.
Just the 106 million one more time, please.
$106,624,199.
Thank you.
Which equates to a 4.03 increase. Thank you, Mr. Rudel. Do we go to a motion to approve that? No. All right, thank you. Thank you for that update. All right, moving on to capital. The central office, copier center renovation, a decrease of $135,500 to eliminate the renovation of the copy center. Do I have a second? Mr. Sini, any further conversation? Mr. Sini.
So I believe we missed this at discussion at cut night. So we didn't discuss this item. I think we didn't even address it, just for the record. Just to let you know.
Okay. Any further discussion on it? Dr. Adley, do you want to add anything into your goals with renovating downstairs for a
Yes,
copy
well,
center?
downstairs is an opportunity to house this production here, which, I mean, it just doesn't work, right? I mean, if you think you're just disrupted here, try having meetings here during the day when people are coming and going and trying to do it. They're also on top of each other, and there's really an unhealthy space. So it takes the opportunity downstairs to expand and create there's a wee bay in there too, which, you know, it's suitable and can be turned into that, which opens this up for other opportunities for us, should we want to do that. Probably potentially even take this technology and make it permanent here and so on and so forth. So it's crying out, we need to do something. It's very disruptive.
So, I'm sorry, Mrs. Ritchie.
So for clarification, because I believe that space is controlled by the Board of Selectmen, and have the Board of Selectmen weighed in on this? In other words, are they supportive of?
Officially, they have not weighed in. I certainly have had discussions with our first selectman, who's very open to it and has reviewed it.
Okay, great, thank you.
And this is for just a specific portion of the downstairs. There's been various concepts over the years brought up as to what should be done down there, but this is
right. And my understanding that they have gone by the wayside.
Right. Okay.
Just
go ahead, Mr. Sini.
And you mentioned maybe moving the technology for the audio video back there. Is that included in this dollar amount?
No, it's not. No.
Would that be an incremental cost of anything meaningful?
Well, if we
should we add money, I guess, make a motion to make a change to add some money, or is it something?
I have to, in all full transparency, say that we haven't decided to move that in there.
Okay.
But it just seems like a reasonable thing to consider.
Thank you.
So could you just real quick, we went through a process previously with the consolidation of printers and copiers and kind of a centralized space back here. And as things move to the cloud or we do less copying, yet we've outgrown the copier center and we've got a piece of equipment out here. So, you know, I guess I just don't understand I would think copying in the copy center would be decreasing as we move files onto the cloud, as we do more with the investment in technology that we have. I mean, is this new machine just doesn't fit back there? And
have you been in there?
I have not been in there. No.
Take a look.
Field trip?
Yes, the space is a premium, and certainly the policies that the board had put in before about copiers and so on, trying to manage it, that has been helpful. But you'll still need a copy center. I mean, it's a huge organization for different reasons.
Okay. Mrs. McCammon.
Did I just understand you correctly to say that right now, it's not just that it's out here, but the way it's configured back there makes it more difficult for the people back there to do their work?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's just nearly unhealthy.
Mrs. Ritchie.
I just wanted to add that we still get packets of paper sent home, so they are making use of the copy center.
Further discussion, Mrs. McCammon.
Yeah, can you expand on that nearly unhealthy, Alan?
Well, they're on top of each other, and just recently we were just be able to get some sort of air filter in there, right? It's just there's the laminate machine, the smell of it. I mean, they're just in too close proximity, and we've tried to help with the installation of some ventilation, but it's just not the ideal location for it. That's all.
Thank you. Further conversation, Mr. Brown.
Just in the future, would getting these digital help you guys out a little bit?
No.
I need my book. I like my book.
Or perhaps an opt-in model?
Would it help our shoulders too?
Do you remember a year ago when I thought the exams were coming across this place? So
Yeah.
All right, keeping us moving forward. Capital copy center renovation, a decrease of $135,500 to eliminate the renovation of the copy center. All those in favor? Okay, all those opposed? All right, so that motion does not move forward. Thank you. All right. All right, now we move to vote on the totals. So Rich, nothing has changed with what you just said on the overall budget?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Can you confirm that
Do
number,
these,
please?
do these, we'll do capital we'll do the operating separate and the capital separate. Okay.
So the capital budget, all priority ones total 2,312,921.
921?
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry, 2,316,000.
312.
312.
$2,312,921, all priority one. Okay. So I'll make a motion to approve an operating budget of $106,624,199, representing a 4.03 increase for the 2021-2022 school year. Do I have a second? Mr. Maroney, all those in favor?
You need discussion.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. Further discussion?
Mrs.
Mrs. Ackman. Thank you. Sorry.
So I will tell you, I struggle with the decision I'm about to make. And in 5 years, I've never made it. But I do not think, I believe in this budget. I believe in much of what's been added to this budget. I believe in our teacher in residences and our CESs and all the work CDSP and CPAC and all the parents who have come forward. But I feel very strongly that since we are not planning for the PPE we know for our teachers and for things like COVID hotline, which we've been told will be in place, that we are out of our statutory duty. And so with that, I do not think I will be able to support the operating budget as much as I believe with so much that is housed in it. And I understand that that might be a solo vote, but I feel very strongly that the law and the case law does not allow us to move forward without those COVID expenses in.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. Any further discussion? All right, moving forward, all those in favor to approve, I'll repeat it again, an operating budget of $106,624,199, representing a 4.03% increase for the 2021-2022 school year. All those in favor? Mr. Sini, Mrs. Stein, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. Ritchie, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. McCammon, Mrs. Parent. All those opposed? Mrs. Ackman. That motion moves forward. Thank you, and thank you for all the conversation and the discussion, all important. Moving forward on the capital budget, priority one items, motion to approve a capital budget of $2,312,921. Do I have a second? Mr. Maroney, further discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving the capital budget of $2,312,921? Mr. Sini, Mrs. Stein, Mr. Brown, Mrs. Achman, Mr. Maroney?
It's unanimous.
Unanimous, thank you. Appreciate that. All right, we have a budget, we have a capital budget. Thank you all for the heartfelt and passionate conversation. Thank you to the public for the comments, the thoughtfulness, and all the discussion that we've had. Much appreciated. Thank you. Moving forward, further discussion and action on proposed revisions to Board of Education policies. Sorry. Is the photocopier machine attacking you? Further discussion and action on proposed revisions to Board of Education policies 5275, Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972, prohibition of sex discrimination and sexual harassment, parentheses, students, 4118, prohibition of sex discrimination and sexual harassment in the workplace, personnel, 5200, homeless children and youth, 5075, physical activity and student discipline, and 5395, transportation. You take these all at once or individually?
No, you can do it.
All at once? All right. So do I have a second to move those forward? Mr. Brown, any further discussion? All right. Do all those in favor of moving those proposed revisions to those Board of Education policies? Mr. Sini, Mrs. Stein, Mr. Brown, Mrs. Achman, Mr. Maroney, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. McCammon, and Mrs. Parent. Mrs. Ritchie is not here. How do you record that, Jill? Just
leave it blank. Thank you.
okay. Thank you. All right, moving forward, thank you. Further discussion and action, Dr. Adley, on the board master agenda for February through August of 2021.
So when we were last at the meeting, items were put on or suggested for this master agenda. So I've recorded those, and the board will have to sort of decide whether they want to do them or not. The February, I'll just point them out, February 23rd, they should be in bold there. You see the update on the strategic plan. That was part of that agenda, but since we do the state of the Darium public schools and everything else, I just don't know that we want to do that. And we've also got the financial report. I just think, again, a dedicated meeting, I'm suggesting December 25th, but
February.
Or sorry, what am I saying? December, thank you, February. The rest of it is as you see it until you come to June. I've got June 22nd, a program review of IDF, of the program. So that's where I would suggest that we would do that. And my suggestion that we would do that, I have a person in mind who could do that for us. July, our retreat date, you'll see I noted a couple of things here, review of student activities, the reciprocal agreement with the YMCA, and then there was discussion at the last meeting about the planning, goal setting, review, evaluation of board performance, superintendent performance, that document. Some people refer to the Cave Caps document, but that's what that is. And I think those were the changes that people were thinking about. There may be others, but if I left it off, it was inadvertent, but go ahead.
Yep, Mr. Maroney.
Just a question on the idea is that just making sure that June 22nd gives us enough time if we decide to make that a 1-credit course on that day. There's no time issue with that.
Yeah, there probably is. I'm not anticipating, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not anticipating that it's dependent upon this, Mr. Maroney. I'm thinking that that may be deferred to next year if that's the case.
Just asking.
Yeah.
I think that would have to move to the following year. Thank you. Mrs. McCammon.
I have a couple of points. We just talked about moving the bus onto the agenda, and I think we talked about that last time. So if we could figure out when to have the board discuss, set the next set of direction, and then come back so that we can be before the next budget season. is one request. I didn't see it on there.
I honestly didn't think it was to be recorded, so.
Okay. The second is when we talk about, perhaps when we talk about the YMCA funding, we could also talk about intramurals. I'm just concerned that we have an equity issue. We may not have any ability to adjust it right now because of the contract, but I just ask that whether we need to consider that. And my third question is whether we want to talk about our public hearing process. You know, on reflection, if the public had asked us to add something that night that we thought was of value, or to switch around how we were thinking of something, you know, I would want to be able to take public comments into consideration. And I respect why we have it the way we have it, but I think maybe we could just talk about whether we might want to reconsider the hearing process or the date of it.
Is that some of the stuff, Jill, you're looking at, or the communications work group is working on?
You know, I could add that to the list there, and then we can bring it through that process.
I think if everyone's in agreement as you go through that work group, and if that's something,
I think we need to discuss it.
okay.
I don't know that
And
you're
it's a
on
work
agreement.
It's not a committee at this point, so it shouldn't be doing work. The work it should be doing is determining whether or not we have a communications committee. There isn't any work being handed down to it because it's not a committee. Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I just,
yes.
I just want to respectfully just make sure that, so the board is looking to put on bus transportation. Is that correct?
So just as a point of order,
just
I think
wanna-
the board hasn't determined it's willing to
Right.
put on anything yet. I think that
Right.
the board needs to have that discussion
Right.
of whether it even wants to put what's proposed on
so-
or what is also being proposed
Right.
on.
So far, what's been added for further conversation is transportation around busing, intramurals. Jill, is that intramurals specific to the conversation around the intramurals at the elementary schools? Okay. And then a discussion around the public hearing versus public comment during board meetings?
Probably the timing of the public hearing and the board's ability to respond.
So
Go ahead, Mrs. Ackman.
so are we pushing out voting on the master agenda then? Because these are new additions for the board to consider, or are we discussing them tonight?
We can discuss them tonight if you want.
I don't know. I'm asking because we didn't know about this. So
Mhm.
we can talk about it tonight. It's 10:30, but we can keep talking.
What would be the limitation of
Well-
pushing it out one more week as we, so we
Yeah,
don't?
I mean, are we fine with, we have those on the table, we can think about it going forward, Mr. Brown?
Pardon me, I think we need to resolve what we're discussing tonight, but I just had one to discuss before we
Sure.
move on.
Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
You know, technology has been mentioned before. We've had another board member who's talked about that. I think having a device-focused conversation, I think we've moved past that. And I would really like to see a curriculum-driven conversation around the technology and the whole technology environment, not just what machines people are using. I don't know when that fits in, but that's something I would like to add as a discussion item for this board to discuss and possibly include.
So, Dr. Adley, would that fit in on an annual update on technology?
Mr. Denise?
Yes, sorry, Mrs. Ackman.
So-
Go ahead.
What the master agenda is kind of the workflow for the administration for the year, usually tied back to goals and objectives. I would say some of what's been discussed, you could tie back to goals and objectives, but I do think we would need to hear from the administration as we throw out kind of these new ideas midstream. What work are we giving up to do some of this new work? And Dr. Adley, what is reasonable to think that you guys can take on in this environment? So, and I'm not weighing in whether it's idea, like some of us have talked, or technology, or busing, but I think we need to start realizing we're actually adding work to the administration. So as a board, we need to agree on that work. And then Dr. Adley, we need to hear, is there anything, because we've now put on new projects, which might be very worthy, that would have to be forestalled?
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. Mr. Brown?
Thank you. Just following up on your point, I agree. We didn't know necessarily where the conversation, so we may continue it now or it may come up later. But I didn't want to move forward without putting that out because I think it is an important matter that the board should discuss and figure out how we want to have it on there or not have it on there. So
Thank you,
I
Mr.
apologize I didn't have all the particulars, but
No, I'm actually not even weighing in on your point to tell you the truth. I think we can throw ideas on. We just, and they might be very valuable. But we need to realize that what we're doing is changing the work order. Like that's why we approve a master agenda. And so there's nothing wrong with pushing it out a week. There's no like statutory requirement. It must be done. But we need, the master agenda is kind of the to-do list for the administration for the year. So as we add to the to-do list, we need to know either, can you get all this done? Or are there things that you say, okay, board, what would you like me to focus on? X, Y, or Z? Like we're adding a lot of work. So I just know in a pandemic, Dr. Adley, how much more work can you all take on?
Well, I think it's, I appreciate that. And I think all the conversations make sense. Might I throw out that I have no issue postponing this to the next meeting. And I would ask those board members that have stuff they want to either add to the agenda or they want brought up in perhaps the special meeting to further the conversation on, if you could email me the information with some bullets so we can define kind of specifically what we're looking to do. So I think to Mrs. Ockman's point, we can understand kind of the work that needs to be done. And I think that would help the administration understand the bandwidth they have to get the work done. I think everything that's been thrown on here is worthy of a conversation. But I think if the members that want to add some stuff could define it a little more with just a couple of bullets so that we can have a little further conversation and the administration can get understanding of the workload potential. Yes, Mrs. Ritchie.
So that sounds like a great idea because for two of the items in particular, the review of the Student Activities Fund and the review of reciprocal agreement for use of facilities with the YMCA, I was looking for more clarification on exactly what we're looking for from the administration because the review of the Student Activities Fund, what does that mean? Are we just going to look at the accounts? Are we doing a manual update? Then we should have the policy committee involved. And the review of the reciprocal agreement, well, there is no reciprocal agreement with the YMCA, and that seems like an operational issue that should be handled with the administration and the YMCA at this point. So what exactly is the goal for putting this on the master agenda? What is the end result we're looking for, I guess?
Thank you. Well, I think what I'll do is I'll work with the individual board members that may have brought this up or individual board members that may have some more information on this, and we'll define each of those things for further conversation. Is that agreeable to everyone?
Yeah, and then as a process point, we as a board would then decide as a group,
Yes.
are we adding this?
Yes, correct. Thank you, Mrs. Ockman.
And if you have a wee bit more clarity about it,
Yes.
I would be a wee bit more
Well-
informed as to how to schedule it or express my.
Well, and I think to Mrs. Ritchie's point too, is we need to just understand kind of operational versus board. Some of this stuff, while it might be operational, it also is accounting. It also affects the budget. So I think a lot of things cross over, but all good comments worthy of further conversation. So for an agreement, that's how we'll move forward. Thank you. Action items, personnel items, Mrs. Sion.
So we do have one retirement, and also the first of our teachers who is out on leave for this year has decided not to return. We are beginning to hear from teachers early, which will help us plan for next year.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Sion, may I have a motion to move forward on the personnel items? Mrs. Ritchie, a second. Mrs. Stein, all in favor? That is unanimous. We go back to our friend Michelle and public comment.
Good evening. If you would like to speak during public comment, please click the participants icon on the bottom of your Zoom screen. When it is your turn to speak, the facilitator will identify you and announce that you are unmuted for public comment. You will have up to 3 minutes to comment. There are no raised hands at this time.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you all for sticking through a long meeting with a lot of good conversation. Thank you for the public for always participating. Thank you for the administration for another late night, and thanks to the board for all your hard work. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening and be safe. Deb Ritchie's keeping me on track here. A motion to adjourn. Mr. Maroney, Mrs. Ritchie, all in favor? That's unanimous.